Hey there and welcome back. If you are settling in now, the lamp turned low, and the day at last letting go of you, then good. Tonight we are going to live a single life inside a very grand house, the kind of house you might tour now on a grey afternoon and wander through with a ticket in your hand, admiring the painted ceilings and the long gilded rooms and the silver laid out under glass. But we are not going in by the front door tonight, and we are not going to be the family. Tonight you are the girl who keeps it all. You are the lowest of the indoor maids in a great country house in the 1870s, an under-housemaid, the one who rises in the dark before anyone and lights the fires that warm a world she is not part of. And I would like to take you down into that life and let you live it from the inside, from the cold attic at the top to the green baize door that divides your world from theirs. You need only lie still and let yourself sink down into it, because here is the strange thing you will come to understand as the night goes on. You may spend years of your one life inside this house, knowing every corner of it, keeping every room of it, and in all that time the family whose lives you hold up may never once truly speak to you, may pass you on the stairs as though you were a piece of the furniture, and tonight, from the bottom of that world, you are going to see the whole of it. Almost everything I will show you tonight is true, and drawn from the real lives of the people who served in these houses, lives that left behind so little because the people who lived them were not thought worth recording. The great families left their portraits and their letters and their names carved into the very stone. The servants who made those lives possible, the hundreds of thousands of them, left mostly silence, a name in a census, a wage in a ledger, a face at the edge of an old photograph taken on the steps. They kept the most beautiful houses in the country running, and they vanished almost without a trace. If sitting quietly with one such life is something you would like to do again, you are always welcome to subscribe, and to come back the next time we go somewhere like this. But there is no hurry in it. The whole point of tonight is simply that one of those vanished lives gets to be lived again for a few hours, and seen and remembered, instead of staying lost. So picture this. It is the dead dark of a winter morning, long before any light, and we are at the very top of the house, up under the roof, in the narrow servants' attics where the maids sleep. Far below you, down 4 flights and more, lie the grand floors you will spend your day keeping, the marble hall, the great staircase, the drawing rooms and the library and the dining room with its long table, all of them dark now and silent and cold, waiting. Somewhere below you too, on the kitchen passage wall, hangs a long row of bells on their coiled springs, one wired to every important room in the house, silent for now but ready to ring and to send you climbing. And between your world and the family's there is a single door, covered in green baize to deaden the sound, that you will pass through many times today, the door that separates the back stairs and the basements and the attics, where the work is done and the servants live, from the bright carpeted world beyond it, where the family lives and the work must never be seen. You are about to cross that line for the first time today. But first you must wake, in the cold, in the dark, at the top of the sleeping house. You wake because your body has learned to wake before any light, before anyone calls you, in the black cold of the attic under the slates. There is no fire up here, and there never has been. The little room you sleep in is bare and plain. A sloping ceiling you cannot stand upright under, a small window deep set in the roof, a washstand with a jug and basin, a few pegs for your clothes, and the narrow bed you very likely share with another maid, the two of you keeping each other warm through the night because nothing else up here will. The water in the jug may have a skin of ice on it. Your breath shows faintly in the dark. And you must get up now into the cold, because you are the under-housemaid, and the under-housemaid rises first, before the upper servants, before the family by hours, to begin the long work of turning a cold, dark house into a warm, bright one before the people who own it open their eyes. You lie one moment more in the small warmth your own body has made, the only warmth that will be given to you freely all day, and then you put it aside and rise. You dress fast in the dark and the cold, because to dawdle is to freeze and because there is no time. The print dress, the apron over it, the cap for your hair, the thick stockings, the boots, your fingers stiff and clumsy with cold and slow on the buttons. There is an order even to how a housemaid dresses, a plainness and a neatness required of you, because though almost no one will see you in these first hours, you must be tidy and proper from the start. A servant of a mansion, even here in the dark attic where no eye is on you. You wash quickly in the cold water what washing you can manage. You make yourself ready. And then you go down, out of the little attic room, into the narrow bare passage of the servants' floor, past the closed doors of the other maids' rooms, to the top of the back stairs, the plain steep uncarpeted stairs that the servants use, that run down through the whole tall house out of sight of the family. And you begin to descend, down through the sleeping house in the dark, toward the work that waits below. The great house holds its breath around you. The family sleeps, and you, the lowest of them all, are the first awake, going down in the cold to begin the day that everyone above you will wake into already made. The household woke in stages, and there was an order even to the waking, the household coming to life from the bottom up and the back forward, the servants rising into the dark long before the family stirred. First, before anyone, the lowest, the scullery maid and the under-housemaid, you up in the cold to light the kitchen fire and the morning fires and set the first water heating, so that the means of the day's work were ready before the day's work began. Then the rest of the lower servants, the housemaids and the kitchen maids, rising to their early tasks, the house filling quietly with the small sounds of the work beginning, the rake in the grate, the carrying of the cans, the first stirrings of the kitchen. Then later, the upper servants, the housekeeper and the cook and the butler coming down to take charge of their domains, the household assembling itself rank by rank as the morning advanced. And only then, last of all, into a house already warm and working, its fires lit and its breakfast preparing, did the family wake, ringing for their morning water, beginning their day in the comfort that the hours of hidden labour below had already prepared. There was a beauty in it, almost the great machine of the household coming to life in its order, the servants rising in their ranks from the lowest up, the house warming and waking by degrees, all of it timed and arranged, so that by the time the family opened their eyes, the apparatus of their comfort was already in motion, fires burning, water heating, breakfast cooking, the day already made for them by people they would never see wake. And you were the first spark of it, the under-housemaid in the cold dark, the very first to rise, the one who lit the fire from which all the rest of the day's warmth came, the small beginning from which the whole great waking of the household flowed. There is a kind of quiet importance in that, low as you are, that the whole grand day of the house began with you, in the dark at the cold grate, the first awake, the lighter of the first fire, the small hidden source of the whole house's warmth and waking. The family would never know it, never think that their grand morning began with a girl in a cold attic rising before light, but it did every day, and you knew it, and there was a pride to be had in being the first spark, the one who woke the house into another day. Let us stay with the cold of the attic a while before the day takes you, because it is the medium you live in, and it tells you, before any task does, exactly where you stand in the house. The family below sleeps in warmth, in rooms where you laid the fires under good blankets and feather quilts, and you sleep at the very top of the house in the one part of it that is never heated at all, the servants' attics under the bare slates, where the cold of the night comes straight through the roof and settles. There is a reason your room is here, And it is not only that the attics are cheap and plain, it is that the servants are kept apart above the family as the basement keeps them below at the two cold ends of the warm house, out of sight, out of the way, near enough to be summoned and far enough to be forgotten. The little window deep in the slope of the roof shows you a square of dark sky, and in the morning the tops of the trees and the chimneys, a view the family never sees, the view from the very top of their house, which is yours alone, because no one else would climb so high or sleep so cold to have it. The uniform you wear is worth a thought, for it marks you as plainly as anything what you are, and it changes through the day with your work. In the morning, for the rough dirty work of the fires and the grates and the carrying, you wear a print dress, washable, of a dark enough pattern not to show every smut, with a coarse apron over it that takes the worst of the grime, and a cap on your hair, the working dress of the lower housemaid, plain and serviceable, and made to be soiled. And then by the early afternoon, the rough work behind you, you change into a darker, neater dress, a black dress perhaps, with a clean white apron and a fresh white cap, the afternoon dress of the housemaid, presentable now, fit to be seen, in which you do the lighter work and the needlework, and answer if you are wanted. The two dresses are the two halves of your day made visible, the print and coarse apron of the dirty morning, and the black and white of the clean afternoon, and changing from the one to the other is a small daily ritual of transformation, the grimed morning maid becoming the neat afternoon one. The cap and the apron are almost the badge of your condition, the sign that announces you a servant to any eye, and the lower servants wore them always, while the upper servants, the housekeeper and the lady's maid, and the still-room maid, were often exempted from the plain uniform, allowed to wear their own dark dresses without the cap, a mark of their higher standing. So even the dress marked the rank, the lower in caps and aprons, the upper in their own clothes, the order of the house written even in what each servant wore. Your good dress, your one decent dress kept for your half-day and for church, hangs in the cold attic waiting for your rare free hours. Dress in which you are not a servant but a young woman like any other, and the keeping of it clean and good against the constant wear of the work is its own small care. Your clothes are the map of your life, the print and apron of the working morning, the black and white of the working afternoon, and the one good dress for the few hours you are free, the working self and the Sunday self, the servant and the woman, kept separate, like everything else, by the green door and the order of the house. The room holds almost nothing, and what it holds is yours, and that is worth something even so. The narrow bed, the washstand with its plain jug and basin, the few pegs, perhaps a small chest for your things, a candle. It is bare and cold and cramped under the sloping ceiling, and it is also in a house where you own nothing and belong nowhere, the one small space that is yours, where you may shut the door and be, for a few hours, not a servant but yourself. You share it, most likely, with another maid, and that sharing, two girls in a narrow bed under the cold roof, is its own kind of comfort, as well as its own lack of privacy, for she keeps you snug and you keep her warm, and in the dark before sleep there is talk, the day gone over, the small troubles and jokes and confidences of two young women who share a life, and that quiet companionship at the end of the long day is one of the things that make the life bearable, the friend in the cold attic who knows exactly what your days are because hers are the same. There is a door in this house that matters more than any other, and it is not the great front door with its portico and its fanlight where the carriages set down their guests. It is a plain door, swinging on its hinges, faced on one side with green baize, that wool cloth stretched tight and studded, and it stands at the point where the servants' world meets the family's. On your side of it are the back stairs and the basement passages and the attics, the bare boards and the stone flags and the whitewashed walls, the working heart of the house. On the other side of it are the carpets and the gilding and the silk, the bright, warm rooms, the world, the house exists to display. The baize is there to deaden sound, so that the noise and bustle of the work, the clatter and the voices and the tread of feet, do not carry through into the family's quiet, and so that their world and yours stay separate, even in the air they breathe. You will pass through that door 100 times a day, and each time you pass through it, you change. On the servant's side, you may speak, hurry, be tired, be yourself. The moment you step through to the other side, you become something else, a silent, invisible, perfectly behaved presence, whose whole art is to do the work and never be noticed doing it. That green door is the truest map of your life there is, the line drawn through the middle of the house and through the middle of your days. You live on one side of it, and you labour on the other. You belong to the bare, cold realm of the back of the house, and you spend your working hours in the warm, lit realm of the front of it, keeping it beautiful, and you are never for one moment a part of that warmth and brightness, only the one who maintains it and then withdraws. The house is built on this division, designed around it, with its 2 separate staircases and its hidden passages and its concealed doors papered to match the walls so that a servant may appear and vanish without ever being seen to come or go. The family's comfort depends on the work being invisible, on the warmth seeming to make itself and the cleanliness seeming natural, and the meals seeming to arrive of their own accord, and so you and everyone like you are kept behind the green door, brought out only to serve, sent back the moment the serving is done. To understand that door is to understand everything about your place. You are essential, and you are hidden. The house could not run for a day without you, and it is arranged at every turn so that no one above stairs need ever be reminded that you exist. And yet your side of the door is, in its way, a whole world too, and not a poor one in everything. The servants' hall, the housekeeper's room, the great kitchen, the long stone passages, the wine cellar, and the larders and the still room and the laundry, the men's quarters on one side and the women's on the other, all of it below stairs or behind the baize, makes up a community as complex and as ordered as any village, with its own rules and ranks and rivalries and friendships, its own meals and its own customs and its own strict hierarchy. In a house, the servants might number 12, 24, more, a whole population living and working below and behind the family's rooms, and among them you are not alone as the little maid of all work in a small town house is alone. You have fellows others who share your long hours and your hidden world, who eat at the same long table and climb the same back stairs and know exactly what your days are made of, because theirs are made of the same. That society below the green door, with all its hardness and all its strict order, will be your real home and your real world, for as lengthy as you serve here, more truly yours than the bright rooms you keep, but never live in, and we will come to know it well tonight, because to know the mansion from below is above all to know the people you share the dark and the early mornings and the endless climbing days with. On the wall of the kitchen passage, where you will pass it many times a day, hangs the thing that rules your life more completely than any person does, and that is the row of bells. There is a whole bank of them, 12 or 20 or more, each one a small bell mounted on a coiled length of springy metal, and each one is connected by a system of wires and cranks running through the walls and under the floors of the household to a bell pull in one particular room. A tug on the embroidered pull in the drawing-room sets one bell dancing on its spring. A tug in the master's dressing-room sets another. A tug in the mistress's bedroom, in the library, in the morning-room, in any of the principal rooms and bedchambers of the house, sets its own bell ringing and swinging, and beneath each bell, or on a board beside them, is painted the name of the room it answers to, so that whoever is in the passage may look up and see at a glance which room is calling and must be attended. The bells are how the house above speaks to the world below. They are the voice of the family reaching down through the walls to summon you, and they may sound at any moment of the day, and when they sound they must be answered. To live below stairs is to live always with half an ear turned to that wall of bells, and there is a particular strain in it that has nothing to do with the weight of any task. It is the strain of never being wholly at rest, never quite off duty, because at any instant a bell may leap on its spring and require someone to climb the stairs and go. You learn the bells as you learn the house, which bell is which room, whose tug is gentle and whose is impatient, and you learn to drop whatever is in your hands the moment the right one sounds, and to go quickly and quietly to answer it. There is something almost alive about them, the way they hang silent and then suddenly jump and jangle, the whole row of them trembling, and the sound carries through the basement and the back stairs and finds you wherever you are, and your body answers before your mind does, already moving toward the stairs. A great house was an early adopter of this system of wires and cranks, a clever piece of engineering that let the family summon any servant to any room without raising their voice or stirring from their chair, and it bound the servants to the house as surely as any chain. This invisible web of wires that ran through the walls and ended in the row of trembling bells and in you, waiting below, listening. For you, low as you are, the bells are mostly not yours to answer directly, and that too is part of the order of things. The personal summons of the family, the ring for the lady's maid or the valet or the footman or the butler, go to those servants whose place it is to attend the family in person. You, the under-housemaid, are too low to be much seen by the family at all, and your work is mostly the rough early work done before they are about, the fires and the carrying and the cleaning, so that the bells rule your day less by calling you up than by setting the rhythm of the whole house around you, the upper servants answering them and coming and going, the household responding to its master's wishes transmitted through the wires. But you live among the bells all the same, and you hear them all day, and you know that the vast apparatus of the house, all its hundreds of tasks and its dozens of workers, exists in the end to answer them, to make the family's smallest wish, expressed by the lightest tug on a silken pull, into warmth and food and light and service, carried up the back stairs by hands the family will never have to think about. The bells ring, and the house moves, and somewhere at the bottom of it all you are climbing the stairs again with something heavy in your hands. Your first work of the morning, before the family stirs, is the fires, and it takes you for the first time that day through the green door and into the great rooms, alone in the dark and the cold. You go with your housemaid's box, the wooden box with its compartments holding the brushes and the cloths and the blacklead and the emery paper and all the apparatus of the grate, and you carry too the cans and the cloths to clear the ashes, and you let yourself through the baize door into the silent front of the house, and cross to the first of the rooms that must be ready before the family comes down. And here, in the grey dark before dawn, you are alone for a little while in rooms of a beauty you have no other share in. The drawing-room with its silk-hung walls and its gilded mirrors and its chairs you must never sit in. The library with its thousands of books in their cases, more books than you could read in 10 lifetimes, you who can perhaps read a little and perhaps not at all. The morning-room, the dining-room, the great cold splendid spaces, all yours for this one dark hour, and none of them yours at all. You kneel at the first grate, and you do the work you will do at grate after grate, through the house, the same work the lowest servant has always done, on your knees in the cold. You rake out the dead ashes of last night's fire into your box, and the fine grey dust of them rises and settles on your hands and your apron and your face. You clear the grate entirely, you clean the hearth, you blacklead the iron of the grate and polish it to a dark shine, you whiten the hearthstone, you make everything clean and fresh, as though no fire had ever burned there. And then you lay a new fire, the paper and the kindling and the coal built up, just so ready to be lit. In the rooms the family will use early, you light the fire now and coax it and see it caught and burning, so the room will be warm when they come down. In the household there may be a dozen fires or more to be cleared and laid and lit before the morning, and though in a grand establishment the work is shared among several housemaids, your share of it is large, and you go from room to room in the cold dawn, kneeling at grate after grate, your hands blackening, your knees aching on the hard floors, making warmth all through the grand rooms for people still asleep above you. There is a strange intimacy in it, and a strange loneliness, to be alone in those magnificent rooms in the dark, tending the fires, the only living soul in all that gilded space, while the house sleeps and the windows slowly grey toward dawn. You see the principal rooms as the family never sees them, empty and silent and cold, in the bare hour before they are warmed and lit and filled with people. You touch everything in them, or near everything, dusting and polishing and tending, more familiar with every object in those rooms than the family who owns them, and you must leave no trace of yourself behind, no smear, no speck of ash out of place, no sign that anyone was ever there at all. By the time the family comes down to a warm, bright breakfast room with its fire crackling and its grate gleaming, every mark of the cold, dark hour you spent making it so must be gone, and you with it, withdrawn back behind the green door to the next of your endless tasks. The warmth must seem to have made itself. The beauty must seem to keep itself. And you who made the one and keep the other must be nowhere to be seen, a ghost who passes through the splendid rooms before dawn and leaves them perfect and vanishes. There is something worth saying about the dawn itself, the actual coming of the light over the house at the end of your first long stretch of work, for it was one of the few sights the early rising gave you that the family, sleeping, never saw. By the time you had lit the morning fires and carried the first water and begun the cleaning, the black night beyond the tall windows would have begun, almost without your noticing, to soften and to grey, and then to pale, and then to take on low at the horizon beyond the park, the first cold colours of the winter morning. You would catch it through a window as you worked, the slow arrival of the light over the sleeping land, the trees of the park emerging from the dark, the frost on the grass beginning to show white, the sky lifting from black to grey to a thin, pale gold, and for a moment, perhaps, you would pause in your work and look at it, the dawn coming up over the great quiet estate, the world being remade in light, and it would be beautiful, and it would be yours, this daily sight that your early rising brought you and that the sleeping family above never knew. It is a small mercy to set against the hardness of the life, the dawn seen through a window while you worked, and yet it was a real one, a daily gift that the work, for all it took, also gave. The family slept through every dawn of their lives, waking always to a day already begun, already lit, already made, and never saw the actual turning of the night into the morning, the slow miracle of the light returning over the land. You saw it every day, alone, at your work in the quiet of the early house, and there was a kind of riches in that, a beauty given freely to the one who rose to meet it, that all the wealth of the family above could not buy because it belonged only to those who were awake to receive it. The dawn was yours, the housemaids, the early risers, the one awake in the sleeping house to see the light come back to the world, and we can leave you there a moment, at the cold window, your work paused, watching the morning come up gold and grey over the great estate, the most beautiful thing in your day, and the one the sleeping rich would never know they had missed. Let us slow the morning right down, now, for there is no hurry, and the slow truth of it is worth feeling. Go back to the first descent, the going down through the dark sleeping house to the work. You come down the back stairs in the cold and the dark, and you let yourself through the green door into the front of the house, and you stand a moment in the great hall before you begin, and it is a strange and beautiful thing, the house asleep before dawn. The hall is vast and silent and dim, the grand staircase rising up into the dark, the tall windows pale rectangles of not quite light, the marble cold underfoot, the whole magnificent space empty and still and yours for this 1 hour, as it is never yours at any other time. You are the only soul awake in all that grandeur, the only living thing moving through the great dark rooms, and there is a loneliness in it, and a kind of strange privilege, too, to have the beautiful house to yourself in the blue dark before the world wakes, to move through it alone in the silence with your housemaid's box, the lowest of its servants, and, for this hour, its only inhabitant. And then the work, slow and known, your hands doing it almost without you. You kneel at the first grate in the dim cold room and you begin, and your hands know every motion, the raking of the ash, the cleaning of the iron, the laying of the new fire, the strike of the light, the small flame growing. There is a rhythm to it, an old deep rhythm, the same motions at grate after grate through the waking house, and your body falls into it, and your mind is left free to drift, half dreaming still in the early dark, thinking its own thoughts while your hands make the fires. The room slowly warms around you as the fire takes. The window slowly greys toward dawn. And you move on to the next room, the next grate, the next fire, through the silent house, carrying warmth into room after room, and behind you the rooms come alive, the fires burning, the chill retreating, the house waking by your hands, fire by fire, into another day. It is the quietest hour of your day, and in its way the most peaceful, the slow solitary fire lighting in the dark before anyone wakes, and we can rest here a while, in the dim warm rooms, with the small flames growing and the house coming gently to life around us before the bells begin and the long day takes you. If the bells are the voice of the house, the back stairs are its spine, and you are forever upon them. A mansion is built with 2 sets of stairs, and more than 2, for there is the grand staircase that sweeps up from the marble hall, broad and shallow, and carpeted and lit, made for the family to descend in their finery, and for guests to admire. And then there are the back stairs, the servants' stairs, plain and steep and narrow and bare, running up the whole height of the house out of sight, from the basements to the attics, the hidden vertical artery along which all the work of the house travels. The family uses the grand stair. You use the back stair, always, and the whole point of it is that you and your buckets and your cans and your boxes and your loaded trays may pass up and down through the entire house without ever once crossing the family's path or appearing in the rooms and corridors they use. You move through the house inside its walls almost on the hidden stairs, surfacing into the family's world only where your work requires and vanishing again the moment it is done. And so you climb. All day you climb. Every drop of water used in the bedrooms above must be carried up the back stairs in heavy cans, the hot water for the family's washing heated below and carried up while it is still hot, the clean water up and the dirty water and the slops carried down again. Every scuttle of coal for the upstairs fires must be carried up, every loaded tray must go up, and each emptied one come down. The back stairs are where you spend a large part of your working life, going up with something heavy and coming down for more, the same plain steep flights over and over, your arms dragged straight by the weight of the cans, your back bent, your legs learning the particular ache of stairs climbed past counting. Water is heavy, far heavier than anyone who has only ever turned a tap remembers, and a great house has no water laid on above the ground floor, and a family that washes and bathes and is weighted on hand and foot uses a very great deal of it, and each drop of it rides up those stairs in your 2 hands and comes down again when it is soiled. You are, among everything else you are, The plumbing of the house, the living system by which water rises and falls through all its floors, powered by nothing but your own back and your own legs and your own two carrying hands. Think of the water again, and what it meant to keep a household with no water laid on above the ground floor. For the carrying of it shaped your body and your day more than any single task. A grand family washing and bathing and being waited on used a very great deal of water, and each drop of it that went above the ground floor went up in cans, in your arms up the back stairs. The morning water for the family's washing carried up warm to the bedrooms. The water for a bath, when a bath was wanted, can after can of hot water carried up to fill the tub, and then the dirty water carried down again. A single bath, a labour of many journeys. The water for the endless cleaning, the water for the bedroom ewers, the slops carried down the whole watery traffic of the house, rising and falling through its floors on the strength of your back and your arms and your two carrying hands. And the hot water especially, for there was no hot tap anywhere, and hot water was wanted constantly, and every drop of it was heated below, on the kitchen range or the still room boiler, and carried up while it was still hot, fast, up the stairs before it cooled. To bring hot water to a bedroom on the upper floor was to heat it below, fill the heavy can, and climb 3 or 4 flights at a pace that kept it warm, the can dragging at your arm, the steam rising, and to do it again and again as the household woke and washed and wanted more. You were, in the most literal way, the hot water system of the house, the living means by which warm water reached the upper rooms, your own body and legs and arms, the pump and the pipes and the boiler all in one, climbing the back stairs with the steaming cans so that the family might wash in warmth without ever wondering how the warm water came to be there in the ewer on the washstand. Lie still now and think of the ease of our own time, the hot water that comes from the wall at the turn of a tap, as much as anyone could want, and spare a thought for the girl who was herself the plumbing of the house, carrying the warmth up the hidden stairs in her aching arms, can after can, all through the waking of the house, so that the comfort might seem, to those who received it, as natural and effortless as turning a tap is to us. There is a rule on the back stairs and in the passages, and you learn it early, that if you should meet a member of the family, or even sometimes an upper servant, you are to stand aside, to draw back against the wall, to make yourself small and still, and to let them pass, and in some houses to turn your face to the wall as they go by, so that you do not so much as look at them. You are not to be encountered. You are not to be a person met upon the stairs, but a thing that draws back and waits and is not seen. It is a strange discipline to learn, this art of becoming invisible, of pressing yourself to the wall with your eyes down and your loaded cans in your hands while the world you serve goes past you as though you were not there. And it teaches you, in your very body, exactly what your place is. The stairs are yours until the family wants them, and then you are nothing, a shadow against the wall, waiting to be allowed to go on with the work that keeps them all in comfort. And when they have passed, you take up your weight again, and you climb, and the house swallows you back into its hidden passages, and the long day's carrying goes on. Once the fires are lit and the family is stirring, the fine rooms must be cleaned, and this is the heart of the housemaid's work, the keeping of the splendid rooms in the perfect order that a house demands. You dust, and dusting in such a house is no light thing, for there is no end to the things that must be dusted, the carved frames of the pictures, the legs and arms and backs of the chairs, the table tops, the mantel shelves with their clocks and their ornaments, the books, the banisters, the panelling, the cornices, the 100 surfaces of rooms furnished overflowing in the fashion of the age. You sweep the carpets on your knees with a brush and a dustpan, or with damp tea leaves scattered first to hold the dust down, working backward across the great expanses of patterned wool. You polish. The furniture must gleam, the brass must shine, the mirrors must be clear, the marble must be wiped, the floors at the edges of the carpets must be cleaned and waxed. Everything in the room must be made perfect, and then left looking as though it had simply always been perfect, untouched, undisturbed, as though no hand had ever laboured over it. And what you are cleaning, hour after hour, is wealth beyond your imagining, beauty and value of a kind you have no other contact with in your whole life. The ornaments on the mantel may be worth more than you will earn in years. The pictures on the walls are worth fortunes. The silver, the porcelain, the glass, the carpets, the very curtains represent sums of money so far beyond anything you will ever hold that they have no real meaning to you as money at all, only as objects, beautiful, fragile, precious things, that it is your task to keep perfect and your terror to damage. For to break or harm something in a house is a serious matter, one that may cost you your place. So you handle the precious pieces with care, and you keep them gleaming, and you live all day among a richness you maintain and never share, surrounded by more wealth in a single room than your whole family has seen in its whole existence, and none of it yours, none of it for you, only yours to dust and polish and protect, the keeper of treasures you may touch but never own, in rooms you make beautiful and then leave, going back behind the green door to the bare boards and the whitewashed walls of the world where you actually live. There is a particular feeling that comes from this, from spending your days amid such beauty and having no part in it, and it is not a simple feeling. There is wonder in it. Sometimes a real pleasure in the beautiful objects, in the morning light coming through the tall windows onto the polished floor, in the gleam of the silver you have just cleaned, in the order and the loveliness of a great room brought to perfection by your own hands. You may take a craftsman's pride in it, in a room well kept, a fire well laid, a surface brought to a perfect shine, the satisfaction of work done well even when the work is invisible and unthanked. And there is something else in it too, harder to name, the quiet daily lesson of the distance between your life and theirs, taught not in words but in the very objects you handle, the soft and the fine and the precious, passing under your reddened hands all day, and then being left behind as you go back down to the plain hard things that are your own. You learn the shape of the world from below, from the inside of a mansion, where the beauty is real and is near enough to touch and is never, ever yours. Come back now through the green door and down to the servants' hall, because this is your true country, the place where you belong, as you never belong upstairs. It is a large plain room in the basement or the back of the house, with a long table down the middle, and benches or chairs around it, the walls perhaps whitewashed, a fire at one end, the row of bells very likely on the wall outside the door. Here the servants gather to eat, and to sit in what few moments of rest the day allows, and the life of the household below stairs has its centre here, at the long table, in the warmth of the one fire that is lit for the servants themselves. After the cold attics and the early dark and the climbing stairs, and the silent splendid rooms where you must be invisible, the servants' hall is the place where you may sit down, and speak, and be among your own, and it is, for all its plainness, a kind of home. Let us go down once more, slowly into the basement world that was the true country of the servants, and walk its stone passages as you knew them, for it was a world entire below the green door, and it had its own geography, as fixed in your mind as any villages. The long stone-flagged passages, cool and dim, ran the length of the house beneath the family's floors, connecting the rooms of the servants' world, and you walked them 100 times a day. There was the kitchen roaring at the heart of it, and the scullery off it, and the larders where the food was kept cool, the meat larder and the dairy and the dry store. There was the servants' hall with its long table, the warm centre of the below-stairs life. There was the housekeeper's room, her parlour and her office, where the keys were kept and the accounts were written and the upper servants withdrew. There was the butler's pantry with its silver and its safe. There was the still room with its preserves and its sweet clean work. There was the wine cellar, locked, the butler's domain. There was the laundry, in the largest houses set apart. And there were the back stairs, rising from all of this up through the house, and the cold attics at the top where you slept. It was a place built for work, plain and functional, with its stone floors and its whitewashed walls and its plain doors, made not to be beautiful, but to serve, the very opposite of the gilded rooms above. And yet it was the world where you lived, where you were at home, where you were yourself, in a way the beautiful rooms above could never let you be. The plaster walls of the passages were curved at the corners, in some houses, so that the servants hurrying with their loads would not catch and bruise themselves on sharp edges, a small practical kindness built into the very fabric of the working world. The passages echoed with the sounds of the work, the voices and the footsteps and the clatter, the bustle of the household going about its business below the family's quiet. This was your country, the stone life below the green door, and for all its plainness you knew it, and belonged to it as you never belonged to the splendour above, the basement kingdom of the servants, the hidden working heart of the great house, where the real life of the place, the labouring human life that kept it all going, was lived day after day out of the sight of the world above. But do not imagine that the servants' hall is a place without rank, a comfortable democracy of the kitchen. It is nothing of the kind. The life below stairs has a hierarchy every bit as strict as the family's domain, and the long table is its map. There is an order of precedence among the servants as rigid as anything among the gentry, and everyone knows precisely where they stand in it, and precisely where they sit. At the top are the upper servants, the housekeeper and the butler and the cook and the lady's maid and the valet, the senior people who run the household, and who are addressed with respect by all below them. Below them come the middle servants, and below them the lower servants, the footmen and the housemaids and the kitchen maids, and at the very bottom, lower than you even, the scullery maid and the hall boy, the youngest and the least. And you, the under-housemaid, sit low at that table, near the bottom, one of the least of all the indoor staff, with almost everyone above you, and only the very lowest below. The order is kept in everything, not only in where you sit. The upper servants are served first, and by the lower servants, so that you who are waited on by no one in your life may find yourself waiting upon the housekeeper and the butler at the servants' own meals. There are things the lower servants may not do, like speak at table unless spoken to by a senior, and there are dignities reserved to the upper servants that you would never presume to. In the grandest houses, the upper servants do not even take all their meals with the rest, but withdraw for their pudding and their tea to the housekeeper's room, a parlour of their own, leaving the lower servants to finish in the hall, so that even below stairs there is an upstairs and a downstairs, a division of the divided, the household's obsession with rank reproducing itself all the way down to the very bottom. You learn your place in this order, as you learn everything else by living it, by being corrected when you forget it, by the 1,000 small daily reminders of exactly how low you stand, and you keep it, because the order is the water you swim in, and there is no imagining yourself outside it. This is the world, below the green door as above it, a ladder of rank from the master at the top to the hall boy at the bottom, and you know exactly which rung is yours. It is worth learning the whole of the order properly, the full population of the world below stairs, because these are the people among whom you will live your life, and each has a place and a power, and together they make up the hidden household that keeps the house alive. At the head of it all, on the women's side, stands the housekeeper, a woman of authority and dignity, keeper of the keys, ruler of the female servants and of the stores and the linen and the still-room, addressed as Mrs., whether she is married or not, a person of real consequence in her domain. Matching her on the men's side stands the butler, the head of the male servants, master of the wine cellar and the silver and the dining room, the most senior man in the house, who in the very greatest establishments might rank below a house steward, but who in most is the highest of all. These two, the housekeeper and the butler, are the senior management of the household, and the smooth running of the whole machine rests largely on them. Beneath them spreads the rest of the order. The cook, a person of great importance and often of fierce temper, rules the kitchen and all its undercooks and kitchen maids, for the food of a house is one of its chief glories, and the cook's skill is prized accordingly. The lady's maid attends the mistress, dressing her and caring for her clothes and her hair, a position of intimacy and some standing, and the valet does the same for the master. Then come the footmen, the tall, well-made men in their livery, whose work is the visible service of the house, waiting at table, answering the door, carrying the messages, attending the carriage, chosen partly for their looks and their height, because a matched pair of handsome footmen was a thing a family displayed with pride. Then the housemaids in their ranks, the head housemaid and the upper housemaids who do the lighter and more skilled work of the bedrooms and the fine rooms, and below them the under-housemaids, where you are, who do the rough early work, the fires and the carrying and the scrubbing, and at the very bottom the scullery maid who scours the pots, often a child of 12 or 13, the lowest and worst paid of all, and the hall boy, the odd boy, who does the roughest jobs of the men's side. Outside the house proper there is another entire world of servants, the coachman and the grooms and the stable boys, the head gardener and his under-gardeners, the gamekeeper, the laundry maids, a population spreading out from the house across the whole estate. This is the machine you are the smallest part of, and there is something almost awesome in its scale and its order, this household of dozens, each in their place, each with their task, the whole of it arranged and regulated and kept in motion to maintain the life of a single family in comfort and splendour. The strict ceremony of it, the precedence at table, the upper servants withdrawing to their parlour, the forms of address, the careful gradations of rank, can seem absurd from outside, this elaborate hierarchy below stairs mirroring the one above, the servants keeping among themselves an order as proud and particular as their masters. But it had its logic and its dignity too, for in a household of so many, order was what made the work possible, and a clear place in the order was, even at the bottom, a place, a belonging, a known position in a known world. You are the under-housemaid. It is near the bottom, but it is a rung on the ladder, and the ladder goes up, and a girl who works hard and keeps her place and learns her trade may rise in time to head housemaid, even one day to housekeeper, to the keys and the parlour and the title of Mrs. and the authority over a household of her own. The order that holds you down is also, just possibly, a stair you might climb. It is worth knowing what your work is actually worth in money, because the figure tells you, plainly and without sentiment, exactly how the world values you, and it is very little. As an under-housemaid you might earn something like 14 guineas in a year, which is to say a little under £15, paid out to you a few pounds at a time each quarter, and on top of that your keep, your bed and your board, your food and your place by the servants' fire. The upper housemaid above you earns a guinea or two more, the kitchen maid much the same as you, and below you the scullery maid and the youngest scrape by on 6 or 8 or 10 pounds, the lowest wage in the house. Set against this the wages of those above stairs in the order, and the distance is plain. The lady's maid earns 20 guineas, and the cook £40 and the housekeeper more, and the butler at the very top of the household may earn 50, 80, even £100 in a year, 6 or 8 times what you earn, and the family above, of course, lives on an income that would pay for 100 of you and never feel the cost. But the wage is not the whole of what service gives, and that is the matter to understand about why a girl took it. The few pounds a year are small, but they are clear profit, very nearly, because your keep is found, your food and your bed and your fire all provided, so that the wage need not go on living at all, but may be saved, or sent home, or spent on the few things you need, your clothes and your boots and your small necessaries. A careful servant could put money by, year on year, building slowly toward something, a little independence, a marriage, a tiny security against the future, in a way that a worker who had to find her own food and lodging out of her wage never could. There were allowances too, in many houses, a little money for your tea and sugar, a daily allowance of beer, small additions to the bare wage. And there was the keep itself, the simple fact of being fed and housed and warmed in a world where many were none of these, the security that was for a poor girl perhaps the truest wage of all, worth more than the few pounds in the quarterly reckoning, the plain certainty of a roof and a meal that service alone could offer her. The person whose authority you feel most directly, day in and day out, is the housekeeper, for she is the ruler of the female servants, and you are one of the lowest of them, and your daily life is largely in her hands. She is a figure of real dignity, the housekeeper of a house, a woman who has risen through years of service to the top of her world, and she carries that authority in her bearing and her dress and her keys. The keys are the very emblem of her office, the great ring of them at her waist, or carried with her through the house, for she holds the keys to the storerooms and the linen presses and the still room and the china closets, all the locked wealth of the household's daily goods, and nothing is given out without her. No candle, no pound of sugar, no clean sheet, but it passes through her hands and is entered in her accounts. She rules the housemaids and the still-room maids. She oversees the linen and the stores and the cleaning of the house. She engages and dismisses the female servants, and she answers in turn only to the mistress herself, with whom she confers each morning on the running of the house. The quality of a place depended above all on the people who held it, and a servant's whole happiness could turn on whether the family and the upper servants were kind or hard, just or cruel, for you lived entirely within their power. A good house, under a fair mistress and a just housekeeper, was a tolerable and even a contented place, where the work was hard but the treatment decent, where a servant was corrected fairly and valued for good work, and cared for in sickness, and dealt with honestly, where the long days were lightened by a sense of being part of a household that, in its way, looked after its own. And there were many such houses, for many masters and mistresses were decent people who felt a real responsibility for their servants, and took a real pride in a household well and humanely run. And a servant fortunate in her place might serve such a family for years in something like security and even affection, bound to them by long service and mutual regard. But there were hard houses too, under cold or cruel employers, where the servants were worked without mercy and treated without kindness, where a harsh mistress found fault endlessly and a tyrannical housekeeper ruled by fear, where the food was grudged and the few comforts withheld, and the servant was made to feel her lowness at each turn, valued as an instrument, and discarded the moment she was no longer useful. And a servant in such a place had little recourse, for to complain was to risk dismissal, and to leave was to need a character from the very people who made her miserable, so that she might be trapped in a hard place enduring, saving what she could, watching for the chance of a better position elsewhere. The luck of the place was one of the great variables of the servant's life, the difference between years of decent, tolerable service and years of misery, and it lay almost entirely outside her own control, in the characters of the people above her, in whether she had the fortune to serve under the kind or the cruel. You hope, in your place, that you have fallen among the decent, the fair mistress, the just housekeeper, the house where good work is valued and a servant is treated as a person, for that, as much as anything, will determine whether the long years of your service are bearable or hard. To you, she is a remote and powerful presence, to be obeyed and respected, and a little feared, the woman who can make your life tolerable or hard, who can correct you, advance you, or send you away without a character if you displease her badly enough. She calls you Mary plainly by your given name, as the lower servants are called, while she herself is Mrs. and is given her full respect by all. For that too is the order of things, the lower servants known by their first names, and the upper by their titles and surnames, another small daily marking of exactly where each person stands. You go to her for what you need, and you answer to her for what you do, and her standards are high, for the cleanliness and order of the house reflect upon her, and a slack or careless housemaid is a reflection she will not tolerate. But she is not, for all her power, your enemy, and the best of housekeepers were fair as well as strict, just rulers of their small kingdoms, who knew the work because they had done it themselves once, who trained their maids well, and dealt with them honestly, and might, behind the strictness, take a real interest in the girls under them, and a real pride in bringing them on. For she was once where you are now, and that is worth holding on to, that the powerful woman with the keys began her own life as a little maid like you, cold in an attic, climbing the back stairs with the heavy cans, low at the long table. She rose by exactly the road that lies before you, year by year, place by place, learning her trade and keeping her character, and climbing the ladder one rung at a time until she reached the top of it, the keys, the parlour, the title, the authority. She is what you might become, if you are hard-working and fortunate and the years are kind, the proof that the bottom is not necessarily forever, that a girl who begins as an under-housemaid in the cold attic may end as the mistress of a household below stairs, respected and secure and in command. She is your ruler, and she is also your possible future, and when she calls you Mary in her plain firm way and sets you to your work, she is speaking to her own younger self as much as to you, the woman she became addressing the girl she was, across all the long climbing years between. There is a room in the mansion you may rise to one day if you are fortunate, and it is worth knowing now, for it represents the better country of the female servants and the road upward from where you stand. It is the still room, and the maid who works there holds one of the pleasanter and higher places among the women, a step well above your own. The still room is where the finer domestic arts of the house are practised, the making of the preserves and the jams and the marmalades, the bottling of fruit, the drying of herbs, the making of cordials and home remedies and even perfumes and candles, and above all the preparing and serving of the afternoon tea, the sandwiches and the cakes and the dainty things, the pleasant, clean, skilled work of the household, as against the rough, heavy work of the grates and the slops. The still-room maid reports to both the housekeeper and the cook, a junior of the upper world rather than a senior of the lower, and hers is a high-status place, often exempted, like the housekeeper's, from the plain uniform, and often the very step from which a clever, ambitious girl is promoted in time to housekeeper herself. To look at the still room from where you kneel at the cold grates is to see the shape of the ladder you might climb, for the work of the house runs from the lowest and roughest to the higher and finer, and a girl moves up it, if she moves at all, from the scullery and the rough housework toward the cleaner, more skilled, more trusted places. You begin, as you have begun, at the bottom, with the fires and the carrying and the slops, the heaviest and dirtiest and least regarded work. Above you lies the lighter work of the upper housemaid, the bedrooms and the fine rooms, the dusting of the delicate things, the closer attendance on the family. Above that the skilled clean work of the still-room, the preserves and the teas, and above that the keys and the parlour and the authority of the housekeeper herself, the top of the women's world, reached by the long climb up through all the rooms below. You are at the bottom of that climb tonight, in the cold, at the grates, but the climb exists. The rooms above are real, and the road from the scullery to the quays, though long and steep and uncertain, is a road that real girls walked, from exactly where you are to the very top of the household, one careful year at a time. Across the divide of the house, on the men's side of the life below stairs, rules the butler, and his domain is one you brush against, but do not belong to, for the great house keeps its men and its women servants carefully apart. The butler is the senior man of the household, and his kingdom is the front of the house service and the cellar and the silver. He keeps the wine, and a household cellar is a serious trust, hundreds of bottles laid down and accounted for, the butler alone holding the key, decanting and serving and guarding it. He keeps the silver, the great weight of plate that a rich family owns, cleaned and counted and locked away, and in many houses the butler sleeps near the silver safe, or has a bed that folds down in the pantry beside it, the most valuable movable wealth of the house guarded by the most senior servant through the night. He waits at the family's table, or oversees the footmen who do. He answers the most important callers at the door. He is the public face of the household service, dignified and correct, the very picture of the well-run house. Under him serve the footmen, and they are a particular feature of the house, the tall liveried men whose work is the visible ceremony of service. They are chosen, in part, for their appearance, for their height and their looks and their good legs in the silk stockings of the livery, because a household displayed its footmen as it displayed its silver, a matched pair of tall, handsome young men in powder and livery being a mark of wealth and style. They wait at table, standing behind the chairs, changing the plates, pouring the wine under the butler's eye. They answer the door and carry up the cards of callers on silver trays. They attend the carriage, standing up behind or riding with it, handing the family in and out. They clean the boots and the knives. They trim and tend the lamps. They carry the heavy things on the men's side, as you carry them on the women's. They are above you in the order, the footmen, and they are also, some of them, young men of about your own age, and that is a matter the house watches with a careful and suspicious eye, for the keeping apart of the men and the women servants is one of the strictest rules of the house, and we will come to that, to the forbidden country between the two sides of the below-stairs world. But before the night is out, the butler's pantry and the silver deserve a closer look, for they are the heart of the men's side of the house, as the housekeeper's room is the heart of the women's, and they show you what a mansion trusted and valued. The silver of such a house was a fortune in itself, the great dishes and salvers and candelabra, the entree dishes and the tureens, the racks of forks and spoons, the whole weight of plate that a rich family had accumulated over generations, kept and used and displayed as a mark of its standing. And all of it was the butler's charge, cleaned and counted and guarded by him and the footmen under him, polished to a flawless shine before every dinner, washed with special care in a lead-lined sink so that no piece should be chipped, counted back into the safe after every use. For the loss of a piece of silver was a serious matter, and the butler answered for it all. So valuable was the silver that in many houses the butler slept beside it, in a bed that folded down in the pantry next to the great safe where the plate was locked away each night. The most senior servant, guarding the most valuable movable wealth of the house through the dark hours, the last line against the burglar. The butler's pantry was his domain, where the silver was cleaned and the wine was decanted, and the men's side of the service was organised, a place of some dignity and trust, the male counterpart to the housekeeper's room, and the whole arrangement, The lead-lined sink and the folding bed and the locked safe and the careful counting tells you what the great house held precious, the silver worth a man's life savings guarded through the night, the treasures of the house valued and protected with a care that the people who cleaned them, the human beings who kept the whole place running, were never quite given. The silver was counted, the servants were replaceable, the plate was guarded through the night. The housemaid who fell ill might be turned off. It was a world that knew to the ounce the worth of its silver and reckoned the worth of its people very differently, and that contrast, the guarded treasure and the dispensable servant, is one more of the quiet truths you learned, living below stairs, where the silver slept safer than the people who shined it. The footmen deserve a longer look, for they are the strangest and most ornamental of all the servants, the only ones whose appearance was itself their qualification, and they show you something about what a household really wanted from its staff. A footman was hired in large part for his looks, for his height above all, for a tall footman was a finer thing than a short one, and a matched pair of tall footmen finer still, and for his shapely legs, which the livery displayed in silk stockings and breeches, and for a handsome face and a good bearing. He was in a sense a piece of the household's display, like the silver and the carriages, a living ornament whose purpose was partly simply to be magnificent, to stand tall and handsome in his powder and his livery behind the chairs at dinner, and to ride behind the carriage, a visible sign of the family's wealth and style. The grandest houses powdered their footmen's hair, an old fashion kept up for show long after it had passed from ordinary life, and the family paid for the livery, and even gave an allowance for the powder, so that the footman, unlike the lower servants, had his finery found for him, and could keep more of his wage. And this gave the footmen, some of them, a certain reputation below stairs, a haughtiness, an air, for they were the aristocrats of the lower servants, well paid, finely dressed, their looks their fortune, conscious of their place above the maids and the rough workers. A footman might earn £20 or £30, more than twice your wage, and pay for nothing, and wear silk and powder, and serve in the bright rooms above while you carried coal up the back stairs, and it would have been easy to resent him, the ornamental man whose work was to be looked at while yours was to be hidden. But the footman's place had its own hollowness, for all its finery, for he too was a servant, displayed and used and dismissed at his employer's pleasure, valued for his body and his looks rather than himself, and when his looks went, when he aged and thickened, and lost the height and handsomeness that was his whole stock in trade, his value went with them, and the ornamental footman of 30 might find himself, at 50, with nothing, his one qualification spent. The livery and the powder were fine while they lasted, but they were a costume, and the man inside the costume was as much a servant as you, as bound, as used, as little his own master, for all that he served in silk while you served in print, and an apron the men's side and the women's side meet, in the ordinary run of things, chiefly at meals in the servants' hall, and at their work where the work requires it, and otherwise they keep apart, the women's bedrooms in one part of the attics, and the men's in another, often with the housekeeper and the butler keeping a watchful guard on the boundary between. There is a wholeness to the below-stairs world all the same, for all its divisions, men's side and women's side together, making up the single household that keeps the house, the butler and the housekeeper at its two heads, the footmen and the housemaids and all the rest in their ranks, the kitchen and the cellar and the still-room and the laundry and the stables and the gardens, all working together in their hundreds of separate tasks toward the single end of maintaining the family above in their splendour. You are one small part of it, the under-housemaid, low on the women's side, and the men's side is a little foreign to you, the butler a remote dignity, the footman above you, and kept at a careful distance, the whole male life of the house running alongside your own, and meeting it only at the edges, at the long table, in the passages, where the two halves of the great servant household come briefly together and then part again to their separate work and their separate stairs and their separate quarters under the cold roof. The kitchen is a world of its own within the world below stairs, and it roars at the heart of the house like a furnace, ruled by the cook with an authority in her own domain that rivals the housekeeper's in hers. It is a large high room, often, built for the heavy work of feeding a household, with a vast range or several, a great fire for the roasting, ovens, a huge scrubbed table down the middle where the work is done, the walls hung with rows of copper pans graded by size and polished till they shine like gold. The whole apparatus of cooking on a scale you would never see in an ordinary house. For the kitchen of a house must feed not only the family and their guests, who may be many, with meals of many courses and great elaboration, but the whole household of servants too, dozens of mouths, 3 meals a day and more, so that the kitchen is at work almost without cease from before dawn until late at night, a place of heat and steam and noise and ceaseless labour, the engine room of the entire vast establishment. The cook rules it, and she is a person of consequence and often of temper, for her skill is one of the chief glories of the house, and she knows it. The reputation of a family as hosts rested heavily on its table, on the elegance and abundance and perfection of the dinners it set before its guests. And so a good cook was prized and well paid and indulged in her moods, and she ruled her kitchen like a despot, her undercooks and kitchen maids flying to do her bidding, the whole hot kingdom turning to her will. Beneath her the kitchen maids do the endless preparation, the plucking and drawing and jointing, the peeling and chopping, and the making of the stocks and the sauces, the rough cooking that supports the cook's finer work, learning the trade as they go, in the hope of one day being cooks themselves. And the heat of it, the sheer heat of a great kitchen at the height of its work, with the roasting fire blazing, and the ovens going, and the ranges crowded with pots, is a point to be felt to be believed. The kitchen staff working through it, red-faced and streaming, the cook at the centre of the furnace directing it all. You, the housemaid, are not of the kitchen, for the house divides its servants by their work, and the kitchen is its own separate kingdom with its own staff and its own head. But you come to its edges, and you feel its heat, and you eat what it produces, and you cannot help but be aware of it roaring away at the heart of the house, the source of all the food, the place where the great dinners are conjured, that you will help to carry up and clear away but never to eat. The abundance of the kitchen, the richness and the plenty of the food prepared there for the family's table, the game and the fish and the joints and the elaborate sweet dishes, is another of the daily lessons in the distance between their world and yours, for the servants are fed plainly and adequately, while the family dines in many courses on the kitchen's finest art, and you may carry up a dish of a richness you will never taste, and carry down its remains and scrape them away. The kitchen feeds everyone, the family in splendour and the servants in plainness, from the same roaring fires, and the difference between the two tables, the one above and the one below, is one more place where you may read, if you care to, the whole shape of the world you live in. The laundry of a house was a realm of heavy labour all its own, and in the largest establishments it was a separate kingdom with its own maids and its own buildings set apart from the house. For the washing generated by a great family and a great staff was enormous, and the work of it hot and wet and endless. The linen of such a house was vast in quantity, the sheets and the pillowcases for many beds, the tablecloths and napkins for the grand dinners, the towels, the personal linen of the family, the aprons and caps and shirts of the servants, all of it, to be washed and dried and ironed in a ceaseless weekly cycle that never caught up with itself. The laundry maids filled the great coppers and lit the fires beneath them, and sorted and steeped and boiled and rubbed and rinsed and wrung the mountains of linen, and turned the heavy mangles and hung the wash to dry, and then heated the flat irons at the stove, and pressed and folded the entire output, day after day, in heat and steam, their hands raw, their arms aching, the hardest of the female labour of the house after the scullery. Abrut, you, the under-housemaid, are not of the laundry, for it has its own staff, but you feel its presence, and you may be called to help it at the busiest times, and you know that your own caps and aprons pass through it, and you know too that the laundry-maid's place, like every place in the house, has its rank and its dignity, the head laundry-maid above the under, the whole little world of the wash-house ordered like everything else. And you see, in the laundry as in the kitchen and the still-room, and your own work, the sheer scale of what it takes to keep a mansion and a family in the cleanliness and order and beauty they take for granted, the armies of linen washed, the acres of floor scrubbed, the hundreds of fires lit, the vast unending labour, divided among dozens of hands, that produces the smooth, effortless-seeming life of the family above. They live in clean-pressed linen and bright warm rooms, and never think of the coppers boiling in the wash-house, or the irons heating at the stove, or the hands raw and red, that make the cleanliness they wear, any more than they think of the grates you blacklead or the slops you carry. It is all simply there for them, the clean, the warm, the ordered, produced as if by magic, and the magic is you, and the laundry maids, and all the hidden labouring hands of the great house, turning endless work into seamless ease. There is one servant in the household who stands even below you, lower than the under-housemaid, at the very bottom of the household, and it is worth sitting with her for a while, the scullery maid, because in her you see where you yourself began, or very nearly, and where the bottom of this world truly is. She is often a child, 12 or 13 years old, newly come from a poor home into her first place, the youngest and the lowest and the worst paid person in the entire establishment, earning perhaps £6 in a year, a sum so small it is hard to credit for work that is the hardest and least regarded of all. Her kingdom, if it can be called that, is the scullery, the small stone room off the kitchen where the dirtiest work is done, and her task is the pots, the endless mountain of pots and pans and the great copper vessels of a kitchen that cooks for dozens, scoured and scrubbed and scraped clean by her small chapped hands, hour after hour, in greasy water, with sand and soda that bite the skin. Her day is the longest of anyone's. She rises first, even before you, because she must get the kitchen fire going and the water heating before the cook comes down, so that everything is ready for the kitchen's work to begin, and she is among the last to finish at night, when the last pot of the late dinner is finally scoured and put away. Between those 2 points she works almost without cease at the roughest tasks of the house, the pots and the scrubbing of the kitchen floors and the scullery and the passages, the carrying and the fetching for the cook and the kitchen maids, the dirty foundation on which the whole glittering edifice of the house's food is built. She is too low to be much noticed even below stairs, this child at the bottom of everything, and her life is hard beyond the telling, and yet she is where many a housekeeper and many a cook began, for the ladder goes all the way down to her, and all the way up from her, and the frightened child scouring pots in the scullery tonight may, if she lives and works and is fortunate, climb in time to a place of dignity and security, as others did before her. To see her is to understand your own place better, for you are not at the bottom, though you are low, and there is someone beneath even you, and that too is how the house works, every rung of the ladder looking down as well as up, every servant with someone below them as well as someone above. It is not a kind arrangement, this, the child of 12, set to the hardest and lowest work for the smallest wage, work from before dawn till late at night at the bottom of a household of plenty, and we should not pretend it was. But it was the world as it was, and the scullery maid was a real child in a real place, and her hard small life was the foundation of the whole, and she deserves to be seen tonight as much as anyone in the house, more perhaps, the least and lowest of all the hidden people who kept the great houses of that age, the child in the scullery with her hands in the grey water, on whom in the end everything else was built. Lift your eyes for a moment from the house itself to the world it sat in, for the house was not alone, but the centre of an estate, and the estate was a small kingdom, and the family at the top of it held a power over the lives around them that reached far beyond their own walls. The house stood in its park, with its gardens and its hothouses and its stables, and beyond the park stretched the estate, the farms and the woods and the fields, and the village where lived the people who worked the land and served the house, the tenants and the labourers and the craftsmen, a whole community whose lives turned, in one way or another, around the household and its house. The family were the great people of the district, the largest landowners, the employers of half the neighbourhood, the patrons of the church, the holders of an authority that was social and economic and almost feudal in its reach, looked up to, deferred to, depended upon, the lords of their small world. And you, the housemaid, came from exactly the world the family ruled, very likely from a cottage on such an estate or in such a village, the daughter of a labourer or a tenant or a village craftsman, gone into service at the mansion as girls of your sort did, taking your place in the vast web of dependence that the great family sat at the centre of. The same family that you served within the house held sway, outside it, over the whole life of the district. Your own family's livelihood perhaps bound up with theirs. Your father, a tenant of their land, or a labourer on their farms, your whole world shaped by their power. To serve in the great house was to be drawn into the very heart of that power, to live inside the house that ruled the district, and to see it from within, the wealth and the authority and the grandeur, and to know yourself, all the while, to be of the ruled and not the rulers, of the cottage and not the hall, serving within the centre of a power that reached out to shape your own family's life beyond the gates. The household was a realm and a kingdom, and you were its lowest subject, born to the ruled and serving the rulers, at the very centre of a power you would never share, in the house that was the heart of everything for miles around, and was never in any part your own. How did you come to this house at all? And how does a servant find a place? For that is its own anxious business, and it shaped the whole insecurity of your life. A servant's position depended utterly on her character, which is to say the written reference given by her last employer, the document that testified she was honest and sober and hard-working and clean, without which she could find no respectable place at all. To lose your character, to be dismissed without one, whether justly or not, was very nearly to be ruined, for no good household would take a servant who could not produce a character from her last place, and a girl turned off without one might sink through the worse and worse positions that asked no questions, toward real destitution. So the character was everything, guarded, depended upon, the servant's whole capital, earned by years of good service and lost in a moment by a careless word or a false accusation, or simply the ill will of a hard employer, and the fear of losing it was one of the quiet pressures under which every servant lived, the knowledge that her whole livelihood rested on the goodwill of those above her. All places were found in various ways, through the recommendations of other servants, through the advertisements in the papers, through the registry offices that matched servants to households for a fee, though these were regarded with suspicion on both sides. The employers warned that a servant once in the habit of the registry was a restless one, always looking for the next place, the servants knowing that some registries were little better than traps. A girl seeking her first place might be helped to it by her mother or a relative already in service, brought in as a scullery maid or a little under-maid on someone's recommendation, and from there she made her way, place by place. Each one entered with her character in her hand. Each one she hoped to step up from the last, more wages, a higher position, a grander house. The moving from place to place was how a servant rose, or hoped to, leaving a house where she had reached the ceiling of what it could offer her for one where she might climb higher, and a good servant with a good character and a useful skill could, over the years, work her way up through a series of better places toward the position and the security she aimed at. You came to this house by some such road, recommended, your character in your hand, hired by the housekeeper after a few questions, and you took your place at the bottom of its order, and now you must hold it, and keep your character spotless, and watch, in time, for the chance to rise. Much of your work is in the bedrooms, and here you come closest to the bodily intimacy of the family's lives, to the unglamorous private truth behind the splendour, for the grand rooms downstairs are for show, but the bedrooms are where the family actually lives, sleeps, washes, and is human, and it is your task to manage all of it. In the morning, once the family has risen and gone down, you go up to do the bedrooms, and there is a great deal to be done. The beds must be stripped and aired, the bedclothes thrown back and over chairs, the windows opened to let out the night's closeness, the feather mattresses turned and shaken and smoothed, the beds remade with a tightness and a precision that is its own small art. The fires must be cleared and laid as downstairs. The rooms must be dusted and swept and set in order. And there are the washstands and the chamber pots, and here is the part of the work that no one speaks of and everyone must do, for in an age before the bathroom and the water closet had reached the bedrooms of even the grandest houses, the family washed in their rooms in water you carried up, and relieved themselves in the night in chamber pots and commodes, and all of it, the dirty water and the rest, must be carried away and emptied, and the vessels cleaned, by you. It is the least dignified labour of all, the emptying of the slops, the carrying down of the covered pails of the night's waste, and it falls to the lowest, to you, the under-housemaid, day after day, the most private and unlovely necessity of the family's bodily life, handled and carried and cleaned away by your hands, so that they need never think of it. There is no romance in it and no splendour, only the plain animal fact that the grandest people are bodies like any others, and that the price of their never having to attend to that fact themselves is that someone else must attend to it for them, silently, invisibly, every day. You carry the covered pail down the back stairs with your face composed, and you empty it and clean the vessel and carry it back, and you say nothing and show nothing, and this too is service, the management of the unspeakable, so that the family may live as though the unspeakable did not exist. It is perhaps the truest service of all, the least seen and the least thanked, the keeping of the body's hidden needs so far out of sight that the people you serve may forget they have bodies at all. And in the bedrooms, as nowhere else, you come to know the family as people, for all that you never speak to them, for a person's bedroom tells their truth. You see the mistress's things laid out, her brushes and her scents and her medicines, the small private apparatus of her life. You see the master's room, the daughters, the disorder or the order they leave behind them, the books by the bed, the unfinished letter, the small human traces of lives lived behind the public splendour. You learn them through their rooms and their things, intimately, one-sidedly, knowing the private texture of their days as well as anyone alive while remaining. To them, no one at all, a pair of hands that makes the bed and empties the slops and vanishes. It is a strange knowledge, the housemaid's knowledge of the family, deep and detailed and entirely unreturned, for they know nothing of you, not your home, not your history, not your hopes, perhaps not even reliably your name, while you know the most private corners of their lives, and that imbalance, that you should know them so well and they know you not at all, is one more of the quiet truths of your place in the house. There is a whole other world within the house that you touch only at its edges, and that is the nursery, the children's kingdom at the top of the house, ruled by the nurse and her nursery maids, where the young children of the family live their early lives somewhat apart from their parents in the care of servants. For in a family, the children were often raised more by their nurses than by their mothers, seeing their parents at set times brought down clean and tidy to be admired, and then taken back up to the nursery world where their real daily lives went on, fed and washed and dressed, and taught their first lessons and put to bed by the nursery staff. The nurse who ran this world held a place of trust and affection, for she had the raising of the family's children, and a beloved old nurse might stay with a family for decades, raising one generation and then the next, more truly a mother to the children in their daily lives than the lady of the house, and loved by them accordingly, kept on in honoured age long after her active work was done. You, the under-housemaid, are not of the nursery, which has its own staff, but you serve it as you serve the rest of the house, carrying the coal and the water up to the nursery floor, cleaning its grates, and you see, in passing, the children's sphere, and it is its own small lesson in the order of things. For the children of the house, even the smallest, are above you, are your masters and mistresses in the making, and you serve them as you serve their parents, and they learn, growing up waited on by servants, that this is simply how the world is, that there are people whose place is to do for them, and the gentle blindness of the comfortable to the labour that sustains them is taught from the cradle, in the nursery, where the child is served from its first days by hands it learns never to think about. And yet the children, while they are small, are only children, and there can be warmth between them and the servants, the housemaid who brings something up given a small confidence, a shy smile, the unguarded affection of a child who has not yet fully learned the distances, but before the world closes in and teaches the child of the house and the child of the cottage, which one of them was born to serve the other. The deepest rule of your working life, deeper even than the hierarchy, is the rule of invisibility, and it shapes how you move and hold yourself through every hour of the day. In the mansion, the ideal servant is one who is never seen, whose work appears to do itself, who is present everywhere and visible nowhere. The whole architecture of the house conspires toward this, the back stairs and the hidden passages and the concealed doors, all built so that the labour of the house may flow through it unseen. And you yourself must complete what the architecture begins, by learning to be invisible in your very person, to do your work in the family's rooms before they are about, to withdraw the moment they appear, to efface yourself, to take up as little space and notice as you possibly can in the world above the green door. There is the simple matter of the body and its tiredness, which underlay every day, and which the family in their leisure could never have understood. You were on your feet from before dawn until after dark, climbing the stairs past counting, carrying weights, kneeling at grates, bending over beds, standing at sinks, the whole day a continuous physical labour, with few true pauses in it, and the body kept the account. There were the legs aching from the stairs. There was the back, bent under cans and scuttles and over the endless cleaning. There were the hands, roughened by the cold water and the blacklead and the work, never quite the smooth hands of a lady. There were the knees, worn from the kneeling. In winter there were the chilblains, the hot itching, painful swellings that came from passing all day between the cold of the early rooms and the heat of the fires, the cold step and the warm grate, over and over until the flesh rebelled. And under all of it, the deep, simple tiredness of a body worked hard from dark to dark, and given too few hours of sleep to recover, the tiredness that never quite lifted, that you carried from one day into the next, the chronic weariness of the servant's life. And yet the body was also strong, and there was a pride in that too, in what it could do. A housemaid in her prime could climb those stairs all day, with the heavy cans and not be beaten by them, could do the hard physical work of the great house and rise the next day and do it again, could carry and kneel and scrub and bend through the long day on a strength built up over years of labour. The work that would break a soft body, the body that had never laboured, you did, day after day, and there was a competence in that, a capability, a plain physical mastery that the idle and the comfortable would never know in themselves. The family above, who never lifted anything heavier than a teacup, who were dressed and fed and carried and waited on, had bodies that could do almost nothing for themselves, while you had a body that could do anything the household demanded, strong and capable and equal to the work. And if the work cost the body dear in the end, in the aching and the tiredness and the chilblained hands, it also made of the body a strong and capable thing, and there was a dignity in that strength, in being able to do what must be done, that was wholly your own and that no one above stairs could give you or take away. You learn, as we have seen, to stand aside on the stairs and turn your face to the wall when the family passes. You learn to time your work in the great rooms for the hours when the family is elsewhere, slipping in to clean and tend and slipping out again before they return, so that the rooms are always perfect and the perfecting is never witnessed. You learn to move quietly, to speak only when spoken to and barely then, to keep your eyes down, to be a smooth and silent presence that disturbs nothing. If you must be in a room when the family is there to mend the fire or bring a tray, you do it with as little notice as possible, and you withdraw, and you do not look at them, and you do not speak unless addressed, and you certainly never ever presume to any familiarity, any sign that you are a person with thoughts and feelings of your own in their presence. You are to be, as nearly as a living person can be, a part of the house itself, a function, a convenience, something that produces warmth and cleanliness and service, and otherwise does not register at all. There is a strange double life in this, in being so present and so unseen, in spending your days at the very centre of these people's lives, in their rooms, among their things, providing their every comfort, and being to them, all the while, very nearly nothing, a shadow at the edge of their vision, instantly forgotten. It can wound, this invisibility, the daily lesson that you do not quite count as a full person to the people you serve, that you may be looked through, passed over, put across as though you were not there. And yet there is also, for some, a kind of refuge in it, a privacy, a freedom even, for the invisible servant sees everything and is held to account for nothing of what she sees, hears all the family's talk because they speak freely before someone who does not quite count, knows all their secrets while keeping her own entirely to herself behind the blank correct mask of service. To be invisible is to be diminished, and it is also, in its way, to be free, free of being known, free of being watched as you watch, free to keep your whole real self hidden behind the green door while only the servant, the function, the pair of hands goes up into the family's world. You give them your labour and your silence and your invisibility, yourself you keep. There is an afternoon shape to the housemaid's day that is worth following, for the day was not all heavy work, and the better hours of it had their own quieter character. The roughest and dirtiest work was done early, in the dark and the morning, the fires and the slops and the carrying, so that by the early afternoon, with the grand rooms cleaned and the bedrooms done, and the household settled into its day, there came for the housemaid a stretch of lighter and cleaner work, and even, on a good day, a little time that was almost her own. She was expected by the early afternoon to have changed out of the rough morning into a cleaner dress and a fresh apron, the dirty work behind her, presentable now, fit to be seen if she were wanted, and the afternoon's work was of the lighter kind, the needlework above all, the endless mending and making of the household's linen and her own things, sitting at last, a needle in hand, in the servants' hall or the housekeeper's room. For there was always sewing, in the days before the worn thing was simply thrown away and a new one bought, when every sheet was turned sides to middle, when it wore thin, every shirt mended, every tear repaired, each hem let down and taken up, and much of this fell to the housemaids in their quieter hours, the patient handwork of keeping the household's vast stock of linen and clothing in repair. It was not rest, exactly, but it was a gentler labour than the mornings done sitting, in company, with talk perhaps the maids together over their mending, and after the cold, dark grind of the early hours it had something almost peaceful in it. And there might be, if the work was done and nothing pressing wanted, a little true pause, an hour around the middle of the afternoon when a housemaid whose duties were complete might attend to her own small affairs, write a letter home if she could write, sit quietly, simply be, before the day gathered itself again toward the evening's work. It was little enough, and it could be snatched away by any demand of the household, but it was there, the better shape of the afternoon, the cleaner work and the quieter hours, the part of the day when the housemaid's life was least hard, and you came to value it, the gentle middle of the day between the grind of the morning and the long work of the evening still to come, and the family themselves, the people at the centre of it all, the ones for whose comfort this whole vast machine of servants turns, are themselves a kind of mystery seen from below. You glimpse them no more. For the most part, figures crossing the hall, voices behind a door, names spoken below stairs, the mistress and the master, and the young ladies and the sons, the people of the house, are as remote to you in their way as you are invisible to them in yours. The mistress you know best, for she confers each morning with the housekeeper, and her wishes shape the running of the house, and she is the one who in some sense employs you all, the female head of the household, mistress of its order and its hospitality and its tone. She may be kind, or she may be cold, exacting or careless, a good mistress who knows her servants' worth, or a hard one who sees them only as instruments, and the whole quality of your daily life depends in part on which she is, for the temper of the mistress sets the temper of the house. The master is more remote still, the owner of it all, away much of the day on the business of the estate, or in town, a figure of ultimate authority felt more than seen by a servant as low as you. Consider the strange closeness of it, that you should spend your life in the most intimate proximity to people you never truly knew, and who never truly knew you. You were in their bedrooms before they woke, and after they slept, you handled their most private things, their clothes, their linen, the vessels of their nights. You knew the disorder they left behind them, the small secrets a room keeps of the person who lives in it, the medicine by the bed, the letter half written, the private habits that no one outside the household ever saw. You were nearer to the daily bodily truth of their lives than their friends were, than sometimes their own family were present at the most unguarded hours of their existence, and yet you were to them no one, a function, a pair of hands, a presence barely registered, while they were, to you, the very centre of your working life, the people you served and studied and knew. It was a closeness without intimacy, a knowing without acquaintance, the strangest of human arrangements, that two sets of people should live so near, share a house, share the most private spaces of life, and remain across an uncrossable gulf, the one knowing the other utterly, and the other not knowing the one at all. You could have told a stranger more about the master's habits and the mistress's moods and the daughter's secrets than they could have told about you, who had no idea where you came from, or what you hoped for, or even reliably, what your name was. And there is something in that imbalance that catches at the heart, the deep one-sided knowing of the servant, the intimacy that went all one way, the housemaid who knew the family as well as anyone alive, and was known by them not at all, who gave them her care and her labour, and her invisible constant presence, and received, in return, not knowledge, not acquaintance, scarcely even notice, only her wage and her keep and her place. To serve was to know without being known, to be close without being acquainted, to live at the very heart of other people's lives and remain, to them forever at the edge of sight, the figure in the doorway, the hands that did the work, the servant whose own whole life went on entirely unseen behind the blank correct face of service. Let your mind rest now on the sounds of the house through its day, for a house is known by its sounds as well as its sights, and you knew this one by ear through every hour. The first sound of your morning is silence, the deep silence of the house before dawn, broken only by your own quiet movements, the soft tread of your feet on the back stairs, the scrape of the rake in the first grate, the small crack and flare of the catching fire. Then, as the household begins to wake, the sounds layer in, the other servants stirring, the first sounds from the kitchen, the carrying of cans, the distant first jangle of a bell on the passage wall. As the family wakes and the day advances, the house fills with the sounds of its full life, the bells ringing through the morning, the voices and footsteps of the family above, the bustle of the kitchen, the comings and goings of the household at work, the household humming with the sounds of the labour that kept it. And then, as the day declines toward evening, the sounds soften and thin again. The bells ring less often. The family gathers quiet in the drawing room. The kitchen's roar dies down to the clearing and the washing. The house settles, room by room, toward the silence it began in, the shutters closed, the lamps lit, the family going up at last, the servants finishing the last tasks, until the mansion falls back into the deep quiet of the night, and the last sounds are the small ones of the servants climbing wearily to their cold attics, a door closing, a whispered word, and then nothing, the great house silent and dark, holding its sleeping people through the small hours, waiting for the under-housemaid to wake before light and begin, with the scrape of the rake and the flare of the first fire, to fill it once more with the sounds of another day. Lie still and let those sounds carry you down, the quiet morning, the humming day, the softening evening, the deep silence of the night. The long round of the household sounds run down at last to stillness, as the house sleeps and you sleep, and the night holds you both in its calm. What happened when you fell ill is a hard question, and the answer depended very much on the house and the people in it, for a servant had no right to be sick and no provision for it, but the goodwill of her employers. The work did not stop because a housemaid was unwell, and a girl with an ordinary cold or ache worked through it, because the fires must still be lit, and the water still carried, and the room still cleaned. And to take to your bed for a small illness was to leave your work to the other maids, who had enough of their own, and to risk the displeasure of the housekeeper. So you worked through what you could, as the poor and the labouring always have, rising into the cold with a streaming cold, climbing the stairs with aching limbs, because the alternative was to fall behind and be thought weak or idle. A real illness, a serious one, was a different and frightening matter, for then you could not work at all, and what became of you depended entirely on the kindness of the household. A good family, a humane one, would care for a servant who fell genuinely ill, would have her nursed, would call the doctor, would keep her place for her until she recovered, would treat her, in her sickness, with something like the care due to a member of the household, and many families did, for many masters and mistresses were decent people who felt a real responsibility for the servants who served them. But not all, and a hard household might resent the sick servant as an inconvenience and an expense, might grudge the care, might, if the illness was long, simply replace her, turning off the girl who could no longer work and hiring another, for there were always more girls wanting places. The sick servant was utterly dependent, with no right to care, no sick pay, no security, nothing but the character of the people she served and their willingness to be kind, and that dependence, That her health and her livelihood rested entirely on the goodwill of others was one of the deepest insecurities of the servant's life, the knowledge that a serious illness might cost her not only her health, but her place, her character, her whole precarious foothold in the world, leaving her with nothing and nowhere to go. And there are the young people, the daughters being raised to be ladies and to make good marriages, the sons being raised to inherit or to make their way, the children of the house growing up amid the splendour as its natural heirs, taking the apparatus of service entirely for granted as the simple water they swim in, having never known anything else. To them, you and all the servants are simply a permanent feature of the world, as much a part of the house as its walls, the people who have always been there to do the things that must be done, scarcely more thought about than the mechanism of the bells. A young lady of the house may live her whole girlhood waited on at every turn, dressed by her maid and fed by the kitchen, and kept warm by the housemaid's fires and driven by the coachman, and never once, in all that time, give a serious thought to the lives of the people who provide it all, not from cruelty, but from the simple blindness of those who have never had to do a thing for themselves, and cannot imagine a world in which the doing must be done by someone. No. It would be easy to hate them for it, the comfortable family who take so much and notice so little, and perhaps sometimes behind the green door, in the freedom of the servants' hall, hard things were said of them. But it was more complicated than hatred, usually, the feeling of the servants for the family. There could be real loyalty, real affection even, a pride in the family served and the house kept, a bond formed over years between a servant and the people whose lives she shared so closely and so invisibly. The old nurse loved the children she had raised. The butler took pride in his master's table. The housekeeper gave her life to a house she came to regard as half her own. And running alongside the hardness and the distance and the daily lessons in inequality, there was often this, a genuine attachment, a sense of belonging to the house and its family, of being part, however lowly, of something grand and enduring, so that the relation between those above the green door and those below it was not simply one of resentment, but a tangled human thing, full of distance and intimacy, both of grievance and loyalty, of knowing them utterly and never being known, of serving people who barely saw you, and yet, in some strange way, being bound to them and to their house for the whole of your working life. There is no day in the life of the house like the day of a great dinner, when the family entertains, and the whole household rises to a pitch of effort and performance that shows you what all the ordinary days are really for. Word comes down that there are to be guests, a dinner of many covers, and the house gathers itself for the event like an army before a battle. The kitchen becomes a place of controlled frenzy, the cook and all her staff labouring for a day and more over the many courses of an elaborate dinner, the soups and the fish and the entrees and the roasts and the game and the sweet dishes and the savouries, each one prepared to perfection, the entire meal timed to come up course by course in flawless order through the long evening. The dining room is made splendid, the great table laid with the best linen and the finest china and the glittering silver and the cut glass, the candelabra, the flowers, every piece in its exact place, laid out under the butler's exacting eye. The footmen are turned out in their best livery, powdered and immaculate. The whole house is cleaned and warmed and lit and brought to its highest perfection, every fire blazing, every lamp trimmed and glowing, each surface gleaming, the house become for one night the perfect machine for the display of wealth and taste and hospitality that it was built to be. Imagine for a moment that you are not the housemaid, but a guest arriving at the house for the first time, sweeping up the long drive in a carriage on a winter evening, and see how completely your own labour, and all the labour like it, has been made to vanish. The carriage draws up at the great front door. The door you may never use, and the door opens before you have to knock, and warm light spills out, and a footman hands you down, and you step into a marble hall of a beauty that takes the breath, the great staircase rising, the fires burning, the candles and the lamps glowing, flowers somehow blooming in the depth of winter, the vast space warm and bright and perfect, as though it had been waiting, effortless, for your arrival. You are shown to a bedroom where a fire already burns, and hot water already steams in the ewer, and the bed is turned down, and everything you could want is already there. You dine that night in a glittering room of flawless silver. You want that for nothing, and nothing you want seems to cost anyone any effort, for it is all simply there. The warmth, the light, the food, the comfort, materializing around you as if the house itself provided it out of its own grandeur. And every particle of that seamless magnificence was made by hands like yours, in labour like yours, kept carefully out of your sight. The warm hall was warmed by fires a housemaid laid before dawn. The glowing lamps were filled and trimmed and lit by the footmen and the maids. The flowers in winter came from the hothouses. The gardeners keep alive through the frost. The turned-down bed, the steaming water, the laid fire in your room were prepared by a housemaid who carried the water up the back stairs and withdrew before you came. The flawless dinner was conjured in a kitchen of heat and frenzy and carried up by liveried men, and the remains carried down to be washed far into the night by maids you will never see. You move through the mansion as through a kind of enchantment, where comfort blooms around you of its own accord, and the whole art and purpose of the household is to sustain that enchantment, to keep the labour so perfectly hidden that the magic seems real, that the magnificence seems to have no cost and no maker. We have spent this night on the other side of the enchantment, below the green door, with the makers of the magic, and so for you the spell is broken forever, and you can never again sweep up the drive of a great house and into its warm lit hall without knowing, behind every comfort, the hidden hands that made it, the housemaid in the cold dawn, the gardener in the frost, the cook in the heat, the whole invisible multitude whose vanished labour was the real magic all along. And your part in it, the under-housemaid's part, is the part no one sees, the labour beneath the spectacle. You will not wait at table, for that is the footman's work, the visible ceremony of the dinner reserved for the liveried men. You will not be in the dining room at all, while the family and their guests are there. Your work is everything that makes the spectacle possible and stays out of its sight, the endless fires kept blazing through the house, the hot water carried up for the guests to dress, the rooms made ready, and above all, when the long dinner is over and the guests have gone up to the drawing-room, the vast labour of the clearing and the cleaning, the mountains of dirty plates and dishes and glasses and silver and pots that a grand dinner generates, all of it to be carried down and washed and scoured and put away, far into the night, by the housemaids and the kitchen maids and the scullery maid, long after the family and their guests have retired, so that the house is clean and ready again before the morning. The dinner that lasted some hours in the dining room generates many more hours of hidden labour below stairs before it and after it, and you are deep in that hidden labour, the unseen foundation of the glittering evening, washing the plates from a feast you never saw at a sink in the basement while the guests' carriages roll away into the dark above. It is a strange thing to give so much of yourself to the making of a splendour you have no part in, to labour through the night so that strangers may dine in beauty, and to know that the whole brilliant evening, the talk and the wine and the candlelight and the many perfect courses, the very picture of the household at its grandest, rests entirely on the hidden work of people like you, sweating in the kitchen, carrying up the coal, washing the endless plates in the small hours. The guests, eating their flawless dinner in the glittering room, do not think of the kitchen's heat, or the scullery maid's hands, or the housemaid carrying coal up the back stairs to keep their fires bright. The splendour is meant to seem effortless, to float free of all labour, a natural emanation of wealth and breeding, and the whole art of the household is to make it seem so, to hide the immense effort beneath the smooth surface of ease. You are part of that hiding, part of the effort that must never show, and there is a kind of pride to be had in it, in a great evening carried off without a flaw, the house performing perfectly, even though your share of it is the part in the dark, the labour beneath the floor, the washing up at midnight, while the beautiful people you served so invisibly drift up to their beds in the warm and the light that you have made. The evening had its own duties, the closing of the house for the night, and they fell to the housemaid as the morning's opening of it did, so that you bracketed the family's day at both its ends. As the light failed and the family gathered for the evening, you went round the house to make it ready for the night. The shutters had to be closed and fastened across the tall windows, room by room, shutting out the dark and the cold. The curtains had to be drawn, the lamps and the candles had to be lit, or seen to, the rooms made bright for the evening. And as the hour grew later and the family thought of retiring, the bedrooms had to be made ready for the night, the fires lit in the bedchambers so the rooms would be warm when the family came up, the beds turned down, the nightclothes laid out, the cans of hot water carried up for the last wash of the day, the chamber candles set ready, the whole apparatus of a comfortable Victorian bedtime prepared by your hands, so that the family had only to climb the warm stairs to snug rooms and sink into heated beds, every comfort waiting, none of the preparing seen. And only when the family had gone up at last, when the last of them had climbed the grand stair to the prepared and waiting bedrooms, could the servants begin to think of their own rest, for the servants' day ends after the family's always as it begins before it. There were the last tasks, the banking of the fires, the final clearing, the securing of the house, and then, at last, the long climb up the back stairs to the cold attics. The lowest servants last of all, you among them, going up to the narrow bed under the slates to take the few hours of sleep that lay between the family's bedtime and your own dawn rising. You were the first up and the last down, the bracket at both ends of the household's day, the one who opened the house in the cold dark of the morning and closed it in the cold dark of the night, and in between held it, snug and bright and running, through all the hours of the family's ease. The family's day was bounded by your labour at both its edges, their waking into the warmth you had made, and their sleeping in the comfort you had prepared, and your own day stretched longer than theirs at both ends, beginning before they woke and ending after they slept, the longest day in the house, the under-housemaid's first lit and last out. The servants have their own dinner, below stairs, and it is a more formal and ceremonious affair than you might expect, a daily ritual that shows you once more how completely the house's obsession with order ran all the way to the bottom. In the grandest establishments, the servants' dinner is conducted with a gravity that mirrors the family's own, and there is even a name for the ceremony of it in some houses, the procession of the upper servants into the hall in their order of precedence, led by the butler and the housekeeper, a solemn little parade that the lower servants already seated and waiting watch file in. The upper servants take their places at the head of the table, the lower servants below them in their ranks, everyone in the seat that their position allots them, you low down near the foot, and the meal proceeds according to a strict etiquette. The food is served in order of rank, the senior served first, and the lower servants may be the ones to do the serving, waiting upon their own superiors at their own meal. The talk, such as it is led by the upper servants, and the lower are to keep their place and not put themselves forward, to speak when spoken to, and to mind their manners under the eye of the housekeeper and the butler. Consider the food, and the two tables of the house, for nowhere was the distance between the family and the servants drawn more clearly than in what each was given to eat. The kitchen that we have seen roaring at the heart of the house produced two quite different kinds of meal. For the family and their guests, it produced the dinners, the many courses, the soups and the fish and the entrees and the roasts and the game, and the elaborate sweet dishes, the finest art of the cook lavished on a table meant to display the family's wealth and taste, food of a richness and variety and refinement that you, who helped to make and carry and clear it, would never taste. And for the servants, the same kitchen produced the servants' meals, plainer, simpler, plentiful enough, but without the refinement, the good plain food of working people, served at the long table in the hall, the bread and the meat and the vegetables and the beer that fed the household, that fed the family. It was not that the servants went hungry, for a decent house fed its servants adequately, and the keep, the food and the board was a real part of the servant's wage, the plain plenty of the servant's table being one of the things that drew girls to service in the first place, the certainty of being fed. But the difference between the two tables was plain, the family's many delicate courses and the servants' plain plenty, the same kitchen and the same fires serving both, the richness going up and the plainness staying down, and you might carry up a dish of a delicacy you would never know the taste of, and carry down its remains, and scrape them away, the food of the family as far above the food of the servants as everything else in the house was. There was an allowance, in many houses, beyond the food itself, a little money for your tea and sugar, a daily measure of beer, the small additions that made up the servants' keep. And there was, now and then, the chance of something from the family's table, a dish sent down, the remains of something fine, a small unexpected richness in the plain round of the servants' fare. But mostly the two tables kept their distance as the two worlds did, the delicate and the plain, the displayed and the hidden, and you ate your good plain dinner at the long table and carried the family's fine one up the stairs and knew, in the very food, exactly where you stood. And then, in the very grandest houses, comes the most remarkable part of the ritual, for after the main part of the meal the upper servants rise and withdraw, taking their pudding and their tea and their cheese with them, and they go to the housekeeper's room, the upper servants' private parlour, sometimes called by a joking name below stairs, to finish their meal in the comfort and privacy due to their rank, leaving the lower servants to finish in the hall. It is the perfect emblem of the whole arrangement, this that the servants should have among themselves an upstairs and a downstairs, that the upper servants should withdraw from the lower exactly as the family withdraws from all of them. The house's ladder of rank reproduced in miniature below the green door, the housekeeper and the butler dining apart from the housemaids and the footmen, as the lord and lady dine apart from their servants, rank within rank within rank, all the way down to where you sit, low at the long table in the servants' hall, one of the lower servants finishing your plain dinner while your betters take their pudding in the parlour. You might laugh at it, or you might find it oppressive, this endless ceremony of precedence among people who are, after all, every one of them servants, every one of them working people far below the family they serve, dividing themselves so carefully into their own little ranks and dignities. But it meant something, the order, even at the bottom, even in its absurdities. It gave everyone a place, a known position, a set of rules to live by, and in a hard and uncertain world, a known place was not nothing. It gave the upper servants their dignity, hard-earned over years of climbing, and it gave the lower servants something to climb toward, the prospect of one day being the ones who withdrew to the parlour rather than the ones left in the hall. And it gave the whole below-stairs world its shape and its cohesion, made it a society rather than a mere collection of workers, a community with its own order, and its own customs and its own pride, in which even the lowest had a place that was theirs. You sit low at the table, and you watch the upper servants withdraw, and you know exactly where you stand, and that knowing, for all that it marks your lowness, is also a kind of belonging, a place in a world, the life below the green door that is, for all its hardness, your own. The work of the house has no end, and this is the deep truth of your days, that the labour goes round and never arrives anywhere. For a house this size is a thing that must be endlessly maintained, forever falling toward dust and disorder, and forever being pulled back from it by the hands of its servants. The daily round is only the beginning. The fires and the carrying and the cleaning and the serving that come round every single day without fail. Beyond it stretch the larger cycles, the weekly and the seasonal labours that the mansion demands, and they are vast. There is the laundry, in a great house often a whole separate establishment with its own maids, the mountains of linen and clothing generated by a large family and a large staff washed and dried and ironed in an endless weekly cycle. There is the silver cleaned and polished without cease, for a household owns a great weight of it, and it tarnishes as fast as it is cleaned. There are the floors and the windows and the walls, the great expanses of them, each on its own cycle of cleaning, and there are the large seasonal upheavals, the spring cleaning above all, when the house is turned out room by room, the carpets taken up and beaten, the curtains taken down, each surface scoured from the cornice to the skirting, the accumulated grime of a year driven out in weeks of heavy labour. The house is forever dirtying itself, as all houses do, but on a vast scale, the coal fires that warm it forever, blackening it with their smoke and their ash, and hundreds of candles and the oil lamps that light it leaving their film on every surface, the dust of the country or the soot of the town settling endlessly, the simple passage of the family and their guests, and the servants themselves, wearing and soiling and disordering everything they touch. And against all this you and the other servants labour without cease, cleaning what will only be dirty again, polishing what will only tarnish, washing what will only be soiled, tending fires that will only go out, in a battle against decay and disorder that can never be won because it must be fought afresh every day. Nothing you do stays done. The room you clean is dirty again, the fire you light goes out, the silver you polish dulls, the floor you scrub is walked upon. You are not building anything that lasts. You are holding the house against the tide that would reclaim it, the slow, patient pull of dust and cold and ruin, and the holding is the whole of the work, endless, repetitive, never finished, beginning again every morning exactly where it began the morning before. The seasons turned the house through different lives, and each brought its own work and its own character to your days. In winter, the season we have mostly lived in tonight, the house drew in upon itself, and the fires were the great labour, each grate in the house burning against the cold, and so each grate to be cleared and laid and lit and fed, the coal carried up by the endless scuttle, the ash carried down, the cold fought in every room from before dawn. Winter was the hardest season for the housemaid, the fires at their most demanding, the water at its coldest, the dark mornings at their darkest, the chilblains coming with the frost. But winter was also, often, the full season of the house, when the family was in residence and entertaining, the great dinners and the house parties, guests filling the bedrooms you must keep, the household at its busiest and most alive. Spring brought the great upheaval of the spring cleaning, when the household was turned out and scoured from top to bottom, the accumulated grime of the winter's fires and the closed-up months driven out in weeks of heavy labour. Carpets were taken up and carried out and beaten until the dust flew, curtains taken down and cleaned, walls and ceilings wiped, every piece of furniture moved and cleaned behind and beneath, each corner reached, the whole house scrubbed and aired, and brought fresh into the New Year's light. It was a campaign. The spring cleaning, weeks of the heaviest work piled on top of the ordinary daily round, and the housemaids bore the brunt of it, and dreaded it, and got through it, and the house came out of it clean and bright for the summer. And summer, when the family often went away to London for the season, or to the seaside, or to visit, brought a strange quiet to the house, the family gone, the household reduced, a chance to do the deep work that could not be done while the family was in residence, and a little ease too perhaps, the bells silent, the pressure lifted, the house resting through the warm months until the family returned and the full round began again. Round the year the work turned, winter's fires and spring's cleaning and summer's quiet and autumn's gathering in, the mansion living its seasonal life and you living yours within it, the work changing its shape with the turning year but never ever coming to an end. And yet there is a kind of meaning in it, even so, even in the endlessness, for to keep a great house beautiful and warm and ordered, day after day, year after year, is a real achievement, a thing of skill and effort and pride, even if the achievement must be renewed each day and leaves no monument behind. The house stands, kept, gleaming, warm, ready, because of you and the others like you, and though no single day's work remains, the keeping itself, the unbroken keeping across all the days, is a thing, is real, is the very life of the house. The grand families and their grand houses are remembered, the architecture admired, the treasures preserved, and all of it was kept and made possible, every day of its life, by the endless invisible labour of the servants, the housemaids and the footmen and the kitchen staff and all the rest, who held the beautiful houses against time with their own hands and their own backs and their own early mornings, and who left, themselves, almost nothing, no monument, no memorial, only the houses they kept, standing still, kept now by other hands or by none. The long labour of the servants vanished into the very perfection it maintained. To none. There is one piece of time in all the week or all the month that is your own, and it is so rare and so precious that it shines in your days like a single bright window in a long dark wall, and that is the half-day off. Time off was a scarce and grudging thing for a servant of the household, for the work went on every day, the fires wanting lighting on Sunday as on Monday, the family wanting their comfort on the holy day as on any other, and so the servants could not all be spared at once, and a day wholly free was a rarity. What you might hope for was a half-day, an afternoon and evening free perhaps once a week, or once a fortnight, and a full day perhaps once a month, the most that many servants could expect, and even that was a privilege that depended on the household, and could be withdrawn if you were needed. But when it came, that half-day, it was a treasure beyond reckoning, a few hours that belonged to no one but you, and you guarded them, and spent them with the particular intensity of the person who has almost no time of their own. You would put on your good clothes, the one decent dress kept carefully for the purpose, and you would go out, through the servants' entrance, and down the drive and out through the gates of the great estate into the world beyond. And for a few hours you were not a servant at all, but a young woman at liberty, walking under the open sky with your time your own. You might walk to the nearest village or town, you might visit a sister or a friend in service in another house, you might go to church, you might simply walk and breathe and be free. If your family lived near enough, you might go home back to the cottage you came from, to your mother and the life of your childhood, for a few hours of being a daughter again rather than a servant. And whatever you did with the time, the precious thing about it was simply that it was yours, unclaimed by any bell or any task or any superior, a small piece of freedom carved out of a life that otherwise belonged entirely to the house. And then it would end, as such afternoons always end, far too soon, the light going, the hour to return drawing near, and you would walk back up the drive to the house that owned your days, and let yourself in by the servant's door, and put off the good dress, and put on the apron and the cap, and the house would close over you again, and the long unbroken round of work would resume, and you would not be free again for a week, or a fortnight, or a month. But you carried the half-day with you, the memory of it, The few hours of liberty held like a small warmth through the working days that followed, and you looked forward to the next one, and that looking forward was itself a kind of sustenance, that the knowledge that there would be, again, a little time that was your own. It was so little, measured against the whole of your labouring life, a few hours snatched from the endless service, and it meant so much, more than the family in their endless leisure could ever have understood, the value of freedom to those who have almost none, the preciousness of a single free afternoon to a girl who gave all her other hours to the keeping of a house that was not hers. Below the green door, in the world of the servants, there was a whole hidden life that the family never saw and never thought about, the life of the staff among themselves, and it was as full of feeling and incident as any life anywhere. Friendships and rivalries and kindnesses and quarrels, the whole human warmth and friction of a community living and working closely together. In the servants' hall in the evening, the work mostly done, there was talk and laughter and the small companionship of people who shared the same hard life and understood it as no one outside could. There were the older servants who took the younger ones under their wing, taught them the work, watched out for them, mothered them a little in the absence of their real mothers. There were friendships between the maids, the deep friendships of girls who shared a bed and a life and their few free hours, who knew each other's homes and histories and hopes. There were rivalries too and jealousies and the frictions inevitable among people thrown together and ranked against each other, the small politics of the below-stairs world, who was favoured and who was not, who was rising and who was slipping, all the human drama of any close community playing out in the passages and the hall. And there was, of course, the matter of the men and the women, the footmen and the housemaids, the young people of the staff thrown together in the house and kept so carefully apart, for romance between the servants was the thing the household guarded against most strictly of all. The men's quarters and the women's were separated, watched over by the butler and the housekeeper, and a maid found to be carrying on with a footman, or worse, might be dismissed without a character, for the house wanted its servants single and devoted to their work, and a servant who married usually had to leave service altogether, the two lives being held incompatible. And yet, human nature being what it is, the feelings came all the same, the glances across the servants' hall, the words exchanged in the passage, the romances conducted in secret in the few private corners and the rare free hours, the whole forbidden country of love between the men's side and the women's, pursued against the rules and at real risk, because the heart does not consult the housekeeper. Some of these secret romances came to nothing, and some to grief, and some, now and then, to a marriage that took two servants out of service, and into a life together, set up perhaps as a married couple in service elsewhere, or in a little business of their own, the rare happy ending to the forbidden below-stairs love. And let us sit a while with the smaller kindnesses and cruelties of the daily life, for a life is made of small things, and the servants' days were marked less by great events than by the small daily weather of how she was treated. There were the small kindnesses that lit a hard day, the housekeeper's word of approval for work well done, the cook slipping a little something extra to a tired maid, the friendship of a fellow servant, the unexpected gift at Christmas, the family that remembered a servant's name and asked after her family, the small human warmths that cost the giver little and meant much to the receiver, that made the difference between a place merely endured and a place where one could be, in a modest way, content. A good word, a fair dealing, a moment of being treated as a person rather than a function, these were the small treasures of the servant's life, remembered, valued, the things that made the long labour bearable, and there were the small cruelties too, the careless word that wounded, the unjust blame, the work piled on without thanks, the being looked through as though one were not there, the daily small reminders of one's lowness that, however slight each one, wore at the spirit over time. The servant had to bear them all in silence, the cruelties as well as accept the kindnesses with gratitude, for she had no standing to object, no recourse but endurance, and the bearing of the small daily slights without complaint was part of the discipline of service, the keeping of the smooth correct face whatever was said or done. It was in these small things, more than in any great event, that the texture of the servant's life was woven, the daily weather of kindness and cruelty, of fair treatment and unfair, of the moments of being seen as a person, and the longer stretches of being seen as nothing, and a servant's happiness depended, in the end, less on the hardness of the work than on the balance of these small things, on whether she had fallen among people who, in the small daily dealings of the household, treated her with decency or without it. You hope, lying in your cold attic at the end of the day, that the balance in your house falls on the side of kindness, that the small daily weather of your life is fair more often than foul, for that, in the end, more than the wage or the work, is what will make your years of service bearable. This hidden world, the life of the staff among themselves, was where you were most truly alive, most truly yourself, for it was the one part of your existence that was not service, not labour, not the keeping of someone else's house, but simply your own, lived among your own people, below the green door, that was, for all its hardness and its strict order, genuinely yours. The family had their grand life above, witnessed and recorded and remembered. You had this, the unwitnessed life of the servants' hall, the friendships and the romances and the talk and the laughter, the whole warm human world that flourished in secret beneath the mansion, unknown to the people above, unrecorded by history, and no less real, no less full of love and grief and hope, for being hidden. It was a whole realm, the servants' own, and it was alive, and it was yours, and the fact that no one above the green door ever knew or cared that it existed does not make it one whit less real than the grand remembered life it secretly sustained. There is the question of how a girl bore it, the long confinement of the life, the giving of nearly all her hours and years to the keeping of a house that was not hers, and the answer is partly that she had known nothing else and expected nothing else, and partly that she found within the life the things that made it bearable. She had grown up, most likely, in a poor home where work began young and hardship was ordinary, and service, for all its long hours, was not so very different from the life she had always known, only in a grander setting, and it offered things her childhood home could not, the regular food, the warmth below stairs, the wage however small, the company of her fellow servants. She did not measure her life against the easy lives of the family, for that way lay only bitterness, but against the lives of girls like herself, the factory girls and the worse off, and against that measure service was a decent and respectable place, and she could take a real satisfaction in having it and keeping it and doing it well. And she found, within the confinement, her own freedoms and her own pleasures, small but real, the companionship of the servants' hall, the friendships, the talk and the laughter below stairs, the half-day guarded and savoured, the quiet hours of the afternoon with her needlework, the pride in her work and the hope of rising, the secret romance, perhaps, conducted against the rules, the letters from home, the visits, the small treasures of a life that was hard but not empty, that had in it, for all its labour, friendship and hope and love, and the dignity of competent work. She was not most of the time miserable, for misery is hard to sustain, and the human spirit finds its footholds even in narrow places, and she made of her narrow place a life she could live, with as much warmth and hope and pride as it allowed, which was more than the comfortable, looking down, ever imagined the servant's life contained. We should not imagine her always sad, the housemaid always crushed beneath her lot. She was a young woman living her life, and there was hardship in it, and there was also friendship and laughter and hope and love, the fullness of a human life, lived below the green door, as full in its way as any life lived above it. Rest your mind now in the warm kitchen at the quiet turn of the evening, for it is the nearest thing to peace your day holds, and there is no hurry to leave it. The great dinner, if there was one, is over, or the family's plain evening meal is cleared, and there comes, before the last duties of the night, a stretch of quiet below stairs, the servants gathered in the hall or the warm kitchen, the worst of the day behind them. The kitchen at this hour is warm and low lit, the great range banked and glowing, the copper pans gleaming dully on the walls, the long scrubbed table where so much work was done now quiet, and the servants sit, those who can, in the warmth, with their mending or their tea or simply their tiredness, and there is talk, and the small ease of the day's labour, mostly done. After the cold attic, and the dark morning, and the climbing stairs, and the long day of work, this cosy silent hour in the kitchen is a kind of haven, the servants together in the heart of the house they keep, snug at last, resting at last among their own. Let the warmth of that kitchen reach you where you lie. Let the stillness of the great house settle over you, the family gone up or going up, the work nearly done, the day folding toward its close. The bells are silent now on the passage wall, the fires are banked, the principal rooms are dark and quiet above, and here below in the warm kitchen, in the glow of the banked range, there is rest, the deep, simple rest of a body that has laboured all day and is allowed for a little while to stop, the earned rest that the family in their endless leisure could never quite know, the sweetness of stopping that only hard work can give. There is nothing more to be done just now, no bell ringing, no stair to climb, no can to carry, only the warmth and the quiet and the low glow of the fire and the company of those who share your life. Rest here a while, in the warm kitchen at the heart of the sleeping house, with the day's work behind you and the night's sleep ahead, in the one quiet, warm hour that is, almost, your own, as the household sinks slowly down into the dark and the long day closes and rest comes gently on. What did it give you, this life? And what did it take? And why a girl would choose it at all are fair things to weigh as we go. These are questions to sit with as the night deepens, and the answer is not simple, for service was both a hard bargain and in its way a reasonable one, given the world as it was. It took a good deal, that is plain. It took your time, very nearly all of it, from before dawn until after dark, with only the rare half-day your own. It took your freedom, binding you to the house and its bells and its endless work, subject to the orders of your superiors and the discipline of the household. It took your youth and your strength, poured into the keeping of another family's house, and it offered, at the bottom where you stood, very little money, a few pounds a year, and hard labour, and a place so low you must turn your face to the wall when your betters passed. It asked you to be invisible, to efface yourself, to give your days to a splendour you had no share in, and a family who barely knew your name. And let your mind drift, as the night deepens down the long years of a life in service, for you will not always be the young girl of this one night, and the years held both a hope and a shadow. The hope was the climb, the slow rise we have spoken of, from under-housemaid to upper, from the rough work to the fine, perhaps in time to the still room, perhaps, if you were able and fortunate and the years were kind, all the way to the keys and the parlour and the title of housekeeper, the top of your world, security and dignity, and a place of your own at last. That was the bright thread that ran through the servants' years, the possibility of rising, the long ladder that real girls climbed, and to keep your eyes on it, to work and learn and hold your character, and watch for your chance, was to live in hope. To believe that the cold attic and the heavy cans were not the whole of your life, but only its beginning, the bottom of a stair that went up. But there was a shadow too, and it would be false to leave it out, for not everyone climbed, and the years that might bring a rise might also bring only age, and age was the servant's quiet fear. The work was hard on the body, and the body that could climb the stairs all day at 20 could do it less easily at 40 and less still at 60. And a servant grown old in service, if she had not risen to a secure place, faced a hard reckoning, for there was no pension, no provision, nothing for the worn-out servant but what she had saved or the kindness of the family she had served. Some grew old in honour. The beloved old nurse, the trusted housekeeper, kept on and cared for to the end by families who valued their long service. Many did not, and faced the failing of their strength with little behind them, and the fear of a destitute old age was real, the workhouse waiting at the bottom for those who fell. We have met you young and strong, at the start of the long road, and that is right, for that is where hope lives, in the climb still ahead. But the road was long, and not all of it led up, and the wise servant saved against the shadow, even as she worked toward the hope, knowing that the years would bring one or the other, the keys or the cold, the parlour or the parish, and that which it would be was never wholly in her own hands. And yet it gave too, and what it gave was not nothing, measured against the alternatives a poor girl faced in that age. It gave you a roof over your head, and a bed, and food, regular and sufficient, which was more than the poorest could count on. It gave you warmth, at least below stairs, and a place in a settled household, and the security, such as it was, of knowing where your next meal came from, in a world where many had no such certainty. It gave you a respectable position, for domestic service was honest and respectable work, far better thought of than the factory or the worse fates that could befall a poor girl alone in the world. It gave you a community, the world below the green door, your fellow servants, a place to belong. And it gave you, above all, a ladder, the possibility of rising, of climbing from under-housemaid to head housemaid to housekeeper, from the cold attic to the keys and the parlour, a path upward that a girl of your birth could find almost nowhere else. The chance to make something of yourself by your own hard work, and to end your days in dignity and security rather than in want. For a girl born poor, with no fortune and no prospects but her own two hands, service was, for all its hardness, one of the best bargains the domain offered, and that is why girls chose it, in their hundreds of thousands, and gave their lives to it, and why you are here, in the cold attic and the climbing stairs and the endless work, having made, like them, the reasonable hard choice of the poor, the realm you knew would not last. And there is something to be said of that, gently, as the night draws toward its close, for the grand houses and their armies of servants were nearer their end than anyone living in them could have guessed. The life seemed eternal, fixed, the natural order of things, the such families in their houses and the servants keeping them, as it had been for generations, and seemed it would be forever. But within the span of a single life, within 2 generations at most, the whole realm of it would begin to fall away. These houses would grow too costly to keep, the wars and the taxes and the changing times would empty them, the families would close the wings and reduce the staff, and at last, many of them, give up the houses altogether, and the servants, the hundreds of thousands of them, would melt away into other work, the factories and the shops and the new kinds of employment that the changing world opened, away from service, away from the green door and the back stairs and the cold attics, into lives of their own. It was not a loss, the passing of it, or not simply a loss, for the world that ended was a world of deep inequality, of girls giving their lives to the keeping of houses that were not theirs, of human beings valued below the silver they polished, and there is no call to mourn the ending of that. But the people were real, whatever we think of the sphere that used them, and their lives were real, and their labour was real, and when the mansions fell silent, and the servants dispersed, a whole vast life of human experience passed into history, and was very largely forgotten. The countless hidden lives that had kept the grand life of the country going dissolving, almost without record, into the past. The houses, many of them still stand, kept now for strangers to walk through, the beauty preserved, the labour that made it forgotten. And we walking through them now, or lying in the dark imagining them, can do for the vanished servants the one thing left to do, which is to remember that they were there, to see, behind every gleaming room and every grand effect, the hidden hands that made it, to grant the forgotten people, for an evening, the reality of their forgotten lives. That is what we have done tonight, and it is a small thing, and it is not nothing, and it is perhaps the truest use that the memory of the such houses can be put to remember not only the families who owned them, but the multitude who kept them, and who deserve, as much as anyone, not to be forgotten. So we should not pity you too simply, nor should we pretend a hardness away. The truth holds both things at once, as the truth so often does. Life was hard and unjust in its rewards, and it used you, and the inequality it was built on was real, and should not be excused. And you were not merely its victim, but a person who had made a reasonable choice among poor options, who found in the work a security and a community and a path upward that the world otherwise denied you, who could take real pride in your skill and your place and your possible rising, who lived a whole full human life below the green door for all that the world above never saw it. You were not a figure of pity, or not only that. You were a working woman making her way in a hard world by the only road open to her, with as much dignity and hope and spirit as the road allowed, and the right way to see you is to hold the hardness and the dignity together, to grant you the whole truth of your life, neither romanticized nor reduced to mere suffering, but seen whole, as you would wish to be seen, a person, entire, living her one life as well as she could in the place the life had given her. There is more to say about how to see this life rightly, for it is the thing most easily got wrong, and the night is the time to get it right. It would be easy to make of you a simple figure of pity, a victim ground down by a cruel and unequal age, and easy in the other direction to make of you a comfortable fable, the cheerful servant content in her proper station, the happy below-stairs domain of the costume drama, and both of these are false, and both betray you. The truth is harder and holds both halves at once. The life was genuinely hard, the hours long, the work heavy, the wage small, the rule of invisibility, a daily diminishment, that inequality it rested on real and not to be excused. And you were genuinely, at the same time, a whole person living that life with skill and spirit and pride, finding real satisfaction in your work, and real companionship below stairs, and real hope in the ladder above you, not a victim merely, and not a contented servant merely, but a working woman making her way through a hard world with as much dignity as it allowed. Both are true, and the holding of both together is the only honest way to see you. The hardness does not cancel the dignity, and the dignity does not excuse the hardness. And the deepest thing, perhaps, the matter to carry away from this night, is the simple fact of how much life there was below the green door in the people the family barely saw. Here was an entire world the comfortable classes looked straight through, a realm of work and friendship and love and grief and hope and pride, as full and as real and as human as the grand life it sustained, and going on entirely unseen, beneath the floors and behind the doors, the hidden life of the hidden people. The family above lived their grand recorded life, and you below lived your hidden one, and yours was no less real, no less full of meaning to you, no less a whole human life. for being unseen and unrecorded and beneath their notice. They saw a housemaid, a function, a pair of hands. You were a person, entire, with a whole inner world, and so was every servant in the house, and so were the hundreds of thousands like you across the land, every invisible serving figure a complete human being with a complete life, unseen but real, forgotten but no less truly there. To remember that, to grant the hidden people the full reality of their hidden lives, is perhaps the truest thing this history can teach, and a fitting thought to carry down into sleep. So let the house go dark now, and let us stay with it a while as it sinks towards sleep, the entire establishment settling into the night. Above the green door, the family has gone up at last. The guests departed or abed, the drawing-room empty, the candles snuffed, the fine rooms dark and silent again as they were before the dawn. The fires you tended all day have burned down behind their guards to soft red embers. The silver is locked away, the butler gone to his bed beside it. The kitchen, roaring all day, has banked its fires and stands quiet, the copper pans gleaming dully in the dark, the last pot scoured and put away by the scullery maid, who has at last, hours after you, been allowed to seek her own bed. The bells hang silent on their springs on the passage wall, still now their long day's calling done. And through the dark house, up the back stairs, the servants climb at last to their cold attics, the housemaids and the kitchen maids, and all the lower staff who rose first and worked longest, going up to the narrow beds under the slates to take their few hours of sleep before it all begins again. And you climb with them, last of all, or nearly, up the plain steep back stairs you have climbed 100 times today with your hands full, climbing them now empty-handed at last, up through the sleeping house to the cold little room under the roof. You undress in the dark and the cold fast, as you dressed this morning, and you lie down in the narrow bed beside the other maid, the two of you keeping each other warm as you have through so many nights, and the cold of the attic settles over you, and the house holds its breath around you in the dark. You have perhaps 5 hours, perhaps 6, before you must rise again into the cold and the dark and begin once more. The fires, the carrying, the cleaning, the endless climbing round of it. You are the lowest of them all, and the first to wake, and the last but one to sleep, and tomorrow will be exactly as today was, and the day after, and all the days, for as long as you keep your place and your strength and climb, slowly, the long ladder upward. There were hundreds of thousands of you. This is the point to hold as the house sinks into the dark. Domestic service was the great hidden employment of that age, the largest single kind of work that women did, a vast army of girls and women who kept the comfortable houses of the country running, from the smallest to the very greatest, and who left behind them almost nothing, no monument, no memorial, scarcely a name. The great houses stand yet, many of them, kept now for the public to wander through, the painted ceilings and the gilded rooms and the treasures all preserved and admired, and the people who kept them, who lit every fire and carried every can and washed every plate and climbed those back stairs 10,000 times, are gone almost without trace. The whole vanished multitude of them, the housemaids and the footmen and the scullery maids and all the rest, their countless early mornings and their endless climbing days dissolved into the very perfection they maintained. Within 2 generations the world that needed them would fade, the grand houses closing or shrinking, the armies of servants dispersing, the whole way of life passing into history and into story. But tonight, for these few hours, one of them was not forgotten. One life from the great hidden multitude was lived again and seen and kept company in the dark, which is perhaps the only thing we can do now for the ones who kept these houses and were never thanked and never remembered, simply to imagine them truly for one evening and grant them the reality of their own hard and dignified lives. Let your mind drift one last time, gently, over the whole shape of the day you have lived tonight, holding it all at once before you let it go. That day of the under-housemaid in the house from its dark beginning to its dark end. The cold waking in the attic before light. The descent through the sleeping house. The solitary fire lighting in the dim grand rooms, the warmth carried from grate to grate. The carrying of the water up the back stairs. The cleaning of the splendid rooms. The bedrooms and the slops. The bells ringing through the house. The servants' hall and the long table, and your low place at it. The kitchen roaring, the dinner carried up, the plates carried down and washed far into the night. The closing of the house, the shutters and the lamps, and the turning down of the beds. And the last cold climb to the attic, the narrow bed, the few hours of sleep before it all begins again. Hold the whole of it in your mind, the long round of the day, and let it slow, and let it settle, the way the mansion itself is settling now into the deep middle of the night. And as it settles, let the one girl widen out, the way a single face will widen as you fall towards sleep, into all of them, the vast multitude she belonged to. She is one under-housemaid, in one great house, on one ordinary night in the 1870s, and she is also every girl like her, the hundreds of thousands who kept the mansions of that age, and left almost no trace. The housemaids and the kitchen maids and the scullery girls who lit the fires and carried the water and climbed the back stairs and vanished. Tonight, through this one of them, we have kept company with all of them, sat in the dark beside the whole hidden multitude, and given them for a few hours the attention the world never gave them while they lived. It is a small thing to remember the forgotten, to imagine one hidden life truly and through it all the rest. But it is not nothing. To be remembered, even once, even by a stranger lying in the dark a century and more later, is more than most of them ever had, and we have done it tonight, for her and through her for all of them, and that is enough, and the household is dark now, and it is time, at last, to let her sleep. Let your mind drift now, gently, away from the particular house and out over the whole sleeping country, for you were not alone, even in the dark, and there is a strange comfort in the thought. Across the land that night, in house after house, in the country and the town, the same scene was unfolding, the same hidden labour rising and falling through the same hidden passages. In every grand house in England, a household like yours was sleeping its few hours under the cold roofs, and would wake before light to the same round, the fires, the carrying, the cleaning, the climbing of the back stairs. The whole comfortable world of the great families, the painted rooms and the glittering dinners and the effortless splendour rested everywhere on this same foundation. The armies of servants in the attics and the basements, the housemaids and the footmen and the kitchen staff, hundreds of thousands of them across the country, all bound to the same life, all keeping the same kind of beauty, all hidden behind the same green doors. If you could have risen above the sleeping land that night and seen into all its such houses at once, you would have seen them everywhere, the same hidden multitude, the maids climbing to the cold attics, the scullery girls scouring the last pots, the whole vast invisible workforce that kept the grand life of the country going, settling now into its few hours of dark before the dawn called it up again. And you would have seen, before light, the fires beginning to be lit, house after house, the points of new flame kindling in the dark, the housemaids in their hundreds of thousands rising into the cold to make the warmth, the real and hidden dawn of the comfortable world, coming up from below and behind in the attics and the basements, before the families woke. You were one girl in one cold attic in one mansion, and you were also part of that vast unseen multitude, the whole hidden nation of servants who kept the great houses of the age, alone in your narrow bed and joined, across all the dark country, hundreds of thousands of others living the very same life, rising the very same way into the very same cold dawn. There is loneliness in the servant's life, And there was company, too, of a kind, in that, the company of the multitude, the knowledge, if you ever thought of it, that you were not the only one, that all across the land your sisters in service were sleeping and waking, exactly as you were, keeping the same beauty, climbing the same stairs, hidden in the same way, a whole nation of the unseen, of whom you were one. If these quiet evenings are something you would like to find your way back to, you are always welcome to subscribe, and to keep me company again the next time we go somewhere like this. There is no rush about any of it. There will be another evening, in some other corner of the past, another life or another house to sit beside for a while, and I would be glad of your company when it comes. But for tonight, that is enough. The great house is dark and still. The fires are embers, the bells are silent, the servants are asleep at last under the cold roof, and you among them, the lowest and the first to wake, taking your few hours of rest, while the dark house keeps its silence, and the long night turns slowly toward another morning that you, as always, will be the first to meet. Sleep well, stay warm, be kind to the people in your house, and I will see you in the next one. Good night.